The dark-haired man declares to Rosalina that their relationship ends here, and he wants a divorce. The dark-haired man sets conditions for the divorce, telling Rosalina to return the Felsdon name and go back to Brighton. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks distressed and angry, her red eyes burning with emotion. A gloved black hand slides a document across a table, likely presenting the divorce papers. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, gasps in shock, clutching her dress as she reads about a 5 million gold compensation. Rosalina angrily questions the compensation and rejects it, reminding them she is Rosalina Felsdon. A close-up on Rosalina's red eye shows intense anger and determination, a red line indicating her focus. The dark-haired man watches with a subtle smirk as a red aura of tension surrounds him. Rosalina screams in frustration and anguish, falling to her knees, proclaiming, "Everything is mine." Several crumpled, legal-looking papers float in an oppressive, dark void. A hand holds a phone displaying text, while a thought bubble reveals an expectation, but a surprise. The person continues thinking that they would be grateful and happily accept such an offer. A dramatic title card announces, "The Villainess. The Tyrant is Divorcing Me," depicting Rosalina Felsdon as a silhouette amidst roses. The narrative describes the villainous Rosalina rejecting divorce, committing evil deeds, and being caught trying to poison someone. The narrative concludes Rosalina's fate, stating she vanished at dawn on the execution grounds, surrounded by symbolic red roses. The scene shifts to a modern city night, where a brown-haired girl in a cap watches the street, thinking about Rosalina's foolishness. The brown-haired girl, now identified as reading the novel, taps her phone, contemplating the story's relevance on a day like today. The brown-haired girl continues tapping her phone, reflecting that her actions are meaningless, yet she persists. The brown-haired girl receives alarming debt collector messages on her phone, which prompts her to think, "If it were me." At a crosswalk, the brown-haired girl looks up sharply from her phone, letting out a surprised, "Ah!" Crossing the street, the brown-haired girl, illuminated by bright lights, thinks she almost couldn't cross. A sudden thump sound accompanies a close-up of the brown-haired girl's wide, shocked eyes, indicating a collision. Amidst a bright, fading light, a faint thought echoes the name, Rosalina. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman with red eyes, looks startled and angry as a voice loudly calls her name. The dark-haired man stands before Rosalina, holding papers and asking if she is listening, as a bewildered Rosalina questions, "Who?" The transmuted Rosalina recalls getting hit by a truck and barely crossing the street, confirming her accident. The pink-haired Rosalina sits in an elegant chair, looking out a large window, processing her new reality. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks at her reflection, or hands, musing, "No way," and then admiring her new, pretty appearance. Rosalina realizes she has become Rosalina Felsdon, her shock, and the villainess's dark aura mixing with thorny roses. Rosalina, now fully embodying the villainess, smirks sinisterly amidst roses, realizing with disbelief that this is a possession. The new Rosalina, with pink hair and red eyes, sits composedly at a table, contemplating the clear implications of her situation. The dark-haired man reiterates his divorce terms, instructing Rosalina to return the Felsdon name and go back to Brighton. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, maintains a stern and serious expression, listening to the dark-haired man's proposal. A black-gloved hand slides a document, presumably the divorce papers, across the table toward Rosalina. The dark-haired man, with a stern expression, gestures toward the document on the table. The dark-haired man offers Rosalina 5 million gold as compensation as she stares at him with a determined expression. Rosalina, with her back to the viewer, sits at the table, intently considering the dark-haired man's offer. The dark-haired man dismisses any potential sadness from Rosalina, stating that crying is useless as well. The dark-haired man reasserts his stance, emphasizing he has said this repeatedly, as Rosalina remains composed. The dark-haired man firmly tells Rosalina that her tears mean nothing to him, as she calmly observes him. Rosalina, with pink hair, giggles to herself, delighted by a new idea, while the dark-haired man watches her, perplexed. A massive amount of gold coins and bills falls, representing an astounding 500 billion won in compensation. The dark-haired man leans in close to Rosalina, telling her that a person should be in their rightful place. Rosalina, smiling confidently, holds a quill and asks the dark-haired man if she just needs to sign. Rosalina confidently signs the divorce papers with a quill, while the dark-haired man watches her, looking puzzled. The dark-haired man is startled as Rosalina promptly hands him the signed document, saying, "Here." Rosalina smiles brightly, surrounded by flowers, and announces to the man, "I'll be going now." The dark-haired man shouts, "Wait!" in shock as Rosalina prepares to depart. Rosalina smiles victoriously, looking back at the shocked, dark-haired man as she prepares to exit. Rosalina grins widely, her red eyes sparkling, as she triumphantly declares to the dark-haired man, "Our relationship ends here." A radiant pink-haired woman is addressed as Madam, while posing elegantly in a beautiful garden. A coachman bows before her, asking for her destination. Stepping toward the carriage, she confidently directs him to Duke Brighton's estate. A flashback reveals the Brighton family's financial decline, which led to Rosalina being called the family's disaster. In her memories, she struggled desperately to be loved, but was met only with whispers calling her a wicked, ominous woman. A softer memory recalls her as a beautiful bride, surrounded by pink flowers on her wedding day. Her husband is remembered, lying peacefully among the blossoms. The memory reveals her husband's name, the stern-looking Argentian Failston. Back in the present, she rides in the carriage, sadly recalling that their marriage ultimately ended in divorce. Resting her cheek on her hand, she thinks that she now understands why her past self was so worked up over the divorce. Peeking from behind a curtain in the carriage, her expression hardens with determination. She makes a silent, resolute vow that no matter what happens, she must get the divorce approved. Her carriage proceeds up a long, grand path toward the magnificent Brighton estate. An off-screen voice announces that the restoration of deteriorated and damaged items has been completed. A bald man with a monocle reads from a document, detailing the restored crystal crafts and engraved carpets. A knock at the door interrupts the silver-haired Duke Brighton, who looks up from his desk in annoyance. A maid enters the room and announces that a guest has arrived. The Duke looks up from his papers, questioning who the unexpected guest might be. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he looks deeply stressed by the interruption. A tense and powerful aura emanates from the clearly irritated Duke. The nervous maid explains that the guest was insistent on seeing the Duke no matter what. Relenting with a weary expression, the Duke states that he has time to spare. Looking out the window, he calmly tells the maid to have the guest wait. A grand, ornate clock ticks away the moments as time passes. The quiet, opulent room is shown, with sunlight streaming through the large windows. With a heavy sigh, the Duke removes his glasses. Rubbing his tired eyes, he decides it's time to call it a day. He turns to the bald man with the monocle, who has been waiting silently, and asks what he wants. The Duke is stunned and enraged. When the man informs him that the guest is still here, waiting in the hall, Rosalina thinks to herself that she knew this wouldn't be an easy visit. Dejected, she feels her father is punishing her, believing he doesn't want her there. She quickly rallies herself, deciding to be confident since she knows the true reason for Brighton's downfall. With knowledge of the original work, she believes she can figure out how to avoid the family's ruin. Crossing her arms, she worries that in the worst-case scenario, her father won't even agree to negotiate. She is startled as her father appears before her, thinking he's shown up surprisingly quickly. Her father glares down at her, sternly demanding to know why Duchess Failston is here. Putting on a dazzling smile, Rosalina announces that she has come to ask him for a favor. A narration explains that, in this society, women don't have the right to make decisions. To get a divorce, the husband must receive permission from the wife's father. Rosalina's expression is firm and resolute, her mind set on her goal. Facing her father directly, she formally requests his permission to divorce her husband. Her father reacts with pure disbelief, telling her she must be out of her mind. He reminds her of how she went berserk over Argentian 3 years ago, vowing that Brighton's misfortune would leave with her. A memory shows her past self furiously declaring that she was done with the terrible house and would never return. He recounts how she stole the family seal to marry without approval and now has the audacity to ask for a divorce. He sighs that her chaotic actions no longer surprise him, while she meekly insists that she has changed. Turning away, she says she doesn't expect him to believe her without reason and offers to make a deal instead. Her father turns back with a skeptical look, scoffing at the mere suggestion of a deal. Rosalina's expression burns with fiery determination as she prepares to state her terms. Looking her father straight in the eyes, she presents her side of the bargain. He must allow her to get a divorce. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks shocked as she is told to return Brighton's name. An elaborate emblem featuring a large letter B, keys, and floral motifs symbolizes Brighton. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, appears distressed and gasps in shock, clutching her chest. The old man with a monocle thinks about Rosalina's unchanging arrogance, while the dark-haired man off-screen calls for the butler. The butler looks startled, asking pardon after receiving an off-screen order to prepare a room. A loud thud sounds as the butler turns to face a closed door, with Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, standing nearby. The flustered butler bows deeply to Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, nervously pledging to serve her. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, stands triumphantly in a grand hall, proclaiming her return to Brighton. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, wakes up crying out, "Ouch! My leg!" In bed, seemingly from pain. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, rolls around in bed, celebrating her completion of the first step. The brown-haired girl's past struggles in university are shown, transitioning to her new life as the elegant Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiling brightly. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, with determined red eyes, thinks intently in bed that seizing opportunities is simple. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, contemplates in bed that her strategy is to act completely opposite to the original Rosalina. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, stretches luxuriously in bed, her face glowing with contentment. The gray-haired man sits on a golden couch in a lavish room, observed by the butler holding a white cloth. A soft clack sounds as the gray-haired man sits alone, lost in thought at the elegant table. The gray-haired man thinks that if the old Rosalina were present, the drawing room would not be in such pristine condition. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks intently and asks, "What?" reacting to an off-screen thought about the order to wait. The gray-haired man recalls how the old Rosalina would have shattered and destroyed everything in a fit of rage, turning the room into chaos. The gray-haired man, sitting composedly, considers giving Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, one last chance. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, yawns widely as she slowly wakes up in her bed. A maid gently inquires if Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, has woken up, as Rosalina begins to stir. Rosalina's hand signals yes to the maid, who asks if she should prepare the bathwater. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, runs her hands through her long hair, preparing to take a bath. A startled maid gasps as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, grabs her hand during the bath preparation. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks on as the terrified maid profusely apologizes, promising never to touch her again and begging not to be fired due to her family's debt. The maid trembles and bows her head, confessing she has committed a grave sin. The maid pleads for mercy, repeatedly apologizing, while Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, remains partially visible. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, laughs cheerfully in the bath, instructing the maid to leave. The maid looks confused, then agrees to leave and promises to return if called. A loud thud sounds as the maid stands rigidly by the door, still visibly shaken. Another maid asks the first maid what is wrong, noticing her stunned expression after her encounter with Rosalina. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, asks if she appears scary, her expression slightly intense. A maid, partially seen, secretly thinks that Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, is creepy and terrifying. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiles widely, causing whispers among two maids, and calls out, "Hey!" The two maids shriek in alarm, looking utterly terrified by Rosalina's demeanor. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holds a small book with a questioning expression as a maid reacts in shock. A close-up reveals the cover of the book Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, is holding, filled with intricate illustrations and text. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, reads a newspaper headline announcing, quote, "Breaking news that the Empire's hero, Failston, is divorcing." The newspaper article introduces Argentian Failston, the sole heir of a great family and the youngest swordmaster, who has led every battle to victory. The newspaper article continues, detailing Argentian's attempt to end his warlike marriage with Rosalina and speculating who will fill the soon-to-be vacant seat beside him. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, stares intently at the newspaper, deep in thought. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, sits with a stern expression, while a maid behind her seems concerned and bewildered. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks surprised, asking, "Really?" Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holding a sealed letter, considers that the original Rosalina might have had friends, despite her difficult personality. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, reacts with shock upon seeing the letter sealed with a blue wax stamp, questioning if it's from Duke Failston. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holds the letter and a letter opener. Pondering if the Duke is upset she didn't beg him, an off-screen thought reveals a 1 million gold compensation, which is clarified as 10 billion, alongside an image of a check. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks surprised and anxious as she reads the letter, stating the check is 20 of the promised amount and requests that the intention remain unchanged. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiles brightly in the bath, instructing to prepare a dark, inconspicuous robe. A promotional page advertises for new staff before showing a preview for the upcoming story. A low murmur rises from the crowd gathered outside a grand, sunlit building. An announcer presents a glowing prize to the eager crowd, declaring the long-awaited moment has finally arrived. As the crowd waits in anticipation, a sparkling, heart-shaped vial of green liquid is revealed. From a balcony, a shocked Rosalina recognizes the prize, exclaiming, "It's the tears of the wind." She beams with hope, realizing this legendary item is the key to breaking Leodor's curse. Laughing triumphantly, she reviews a letter from Argentian Failston, confirming a large contract fee has been paid. Brimming with confidence, she muses that this will be easy and plans to buy delicious food with the leftover money. A few minutes later, her confidence shatters as she grits her teeth in frustration, finding the situation anything but easy. The bidding quickly climbs from 600,000 to 700,000 gold, leaving Rosalina stunned as a rival outbids her. She trembles with anger, realizing a specific person keeps interfering by bidding higher every time. Her mysterious rival is revealed to be the cloaked and masked man, who continues to drive up the price. Her spirits lift as she recalls she has 1 million gold, her confidence returning with a bright smile. Gripping her paddle with fierce determination, she prepares to make a bid she cannot lose. Rosalina leaps to her feet, thrusting her paddle into the air to place her final, decisive bid. Her gamble pays off, and she triumphantly holds the precious vial in her hand. In a moment of pure joy, she playfully presents the tears of the wind she fought so hard to win. As she walks away, the masked man who bid against her approaches from behind and proposes a trade. Rosalina turns to face him, a suspicious and questioning look in her eyes. He confidently tells her the vial is no mere trinket and guarantees she has no need for it. Leaning in close, he makes a shocking offer of 5 million gold for the vial. She immediately rejects his offer, wondering what he could possibly be talking about. Angrily, she calls him suspicious and questions why he didn't just bid higher at the auction if he had so much money. She strikes a victorious pose, telling him not to judge her by his shallow standards. She clutches the precious bottle, passionately explaining it's for her brother who is sick in bed. The masked man reaches for her, his expression suddenly serious as he begins to speak. Rosalina glares back fiercely, telling him that he is the one who should give up. A dark, bloody vision overwhelms the cloaked man as he feels a familiar madness coming for him, while Rosalina looks on in shock. A shadowy force chokes Rosalina as she cries out, while the man continues to struggle against his inner torment. The vision subsides, and a confused Rosalina asks the shaken man if he was even listening to her. Covering his face, the man understands her desperation is for her family and apologizes for his rudeness. He concedes, telling her that a carriage is waiting for her at the entrance. The cloaked man looks down at a handkerchief, his red eye filled with turmoil. Rosalina offers him the cloth, telling him he looks tired and should wipe his sweat. She playfully dismisses his protests, suggesting it's a thank you gift for giving up, but he insists he can't accept a lady's handkerchief. Ignoring his refusal, she gently presses the handkerchief to his face. He looks down at the cloth in his hand, suspiciously asking if she's used someone else's handkerchief. His eye widens in shock as a sudden realization hits him, and he questions what he's holding. Stunned, he looks at the handkerchief as if seeing it for the first time. With a cheerful wave, Rosalina bids him farewell and departs. Holding his mask, the man senses that something about him has changed. Elsewhere, Duke Brighton discusses a report regarding the suppression of a fire on the estate. Suddenly, an aide gasps in shock at something he's just been told. Duke Brighton explodes with fury, screaming his daughter's name, "Rosalina!" Thump! He slams his fist onto his desk, shattering the wood. The enraged Duke storms out of his office. He bitterly thinks to himself that he was a fool. He remembers giving Rosalina another chance despite her past betrayals. Bursting through a set of doors, he once again screams her name in a rage. The narration reveals that long ago, the House of Brighton lost two precious things. Beatrice, the family's mistress with long pink hair, is depicted as an important figure connected to something passed down, the guardianship of Brighton, while a shadowed figure of a child is shown below, clutching an unseen object. Young Rosalina, becoming a fairy branch, initiated an angry fairy's curse, causing pink lightning to strike and Leodor to fall into an eternal sleep. Pink lightning flashes as a small shadowy child reaches out to a white-robed figure. Pink lightning strikes Beatrice, who appears to be shielding a small child from the magical attack. Beatrice, having shielded Rosalina from the curse, went into early labor from the shock, depicted as a shattered family portrait with lightning affecting her and the baby. Beatrice died during childbirth due to the shock, leaving behind young Rosalina, who lost her memory from the traumatic event. One cursed witness, a shadowy figure lying in bed, survived the event. A shadowed woman cries, emphasized by the thought that her survival was a true miracle. Eliza, Beatrice's maid, demands that something be handed over. Eliza refuses to let Leodor eat a suspicious item, while Rosalina insists it's not suspicious and she can prove it. Eliza, frustrated by the uncooperative person, declares there's no other option and shouts for Dorota. Rosalina is seized by maids while the gray-haired man intervenes, angrily exclaiming, "Rosalina," and expressing his dismay at her actions. Eliza screams, "My lord," as the gray-haired man holds her, and she then looks shocked, calling Rosalina's name. A soft thud sounds as a person steps out of bed, indicating movement. The gray-haired man confronts Rosalina, asking, "What are you trying to pull this time?" as the scene focuses on her name. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holds an ornate bottle with green liquid, and a soft pop sounds as she opens it. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, gulps down the green liquid from the ornate bottle. Rosalina holds up the Tears of the Wind bottle, demonstrating that the medicine is not poisonous. Rosalina and the gray-haired man stand by a bed, Rosalina believing the medicine will definitely have an effect. Eliza, looking angry, loudly questions, "How can I believe that?" as the gray-haired man observes. Rosalina, smiling, explains that the Feldstrons are a mysterious family, revealing she learned secrets from a library's original text. Rosalina confidently states she had ample time to research, while the gray-haired man looks doubtful, reflecting on his 3 years alone. The gray-haired man acknowledges that Rosalina's actions are possible and typical of her unpredictable nature. The gray-haired man, Eliza beside him, declares to Rosalina, "All right, the path is open." Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks off-screen with an intense, determined expression. A sleeping white-haired man lies in bed, with the thought that trust must be gained from the Duke of Brighton. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, appears anxious as she questions if her plan will it really work. The gray-haired man and Eliza loudly cry out, "Leodor!" in shock, while Rosalina gasps, "Oh my!" Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks at a hand touching the white-haired man's hand, softly questioning, "Brother?" A soft sound emanates from the white-haired man's closed eye, indicating a subtle change. The white-haired man remains cursed in bed, as Rosalina looks on with a shocked expression. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, vows with determination to help the white-haired man wake up as soon as possible. Eliza walks away with a soft click, followed by visuals of distress and an angry, distraught Eliza as a soft crunch sounds. The gray-haired man scoffs and says, "Stop joking," as a cartoon bubble shows a shocked Rosalina wondering if he means joking. Rosalina, surrounded by luxurious dresses and jewels, hears the gray-haired man promise whatever you want, causing her to wonder if he is truly the Duke. Rosalina hesitates, then is surprised when the gray-haired man mentions the summer villa that you've been begging for since you were little, and she exclaims, "The villa." Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks shocked as she realizes there's no reason for a reward for her actions. Rosalina pauses, then brightly declares, "Actually there is one thing," surprising the gray-haired man who thinks, as expected. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiles sweetly and acknowledges the gray-haired man's busy schedule. The gray-haired man looks perplexed as Rosalina requests that he spend more time with Leodor. The gray-haired man gazes at a painting of young Rosalina, pondering if has she changed. A crashing sound is heard as the gray-haired man looks surprised, while a servant profusely apologizes, begging, "I'm sorry." Lady Rosalina, The gray-haired man observes a small, weeping maid on the floor who desperately begs, "I'm so sorry, so sorry. Please, just save my life." The gray-haired man ponders if Rosalina matured and failed in it, while an internal thought repeats the promise to help someone wake up soon. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks determinedly as she declares, "I promise." Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiles brightly, radiating a triumphant glow. A visually pleasing floral pattern serves as a delicate, atmospheric transition. The gray-haired man's pensive face reflects deep thought. Eliza reacts with shock to the divorce approval amidst shattering glass, then angrily questions how Rosalina officially snuck into Brighton. The reddish-purple-haired woman seethes with anger, realizing that wicked Leodor is the cause of her problems. Dismissing her anger with a frustrated whatever, the woman's annoyance lingers. With a sudden kick, a maid gasps in shock as she is knocked to the floor. The reddish-purple-haired woman glares down from her seat at the fallen maid. She lets out a piercing "ah" as she is brutally kicked again. The woman grips a strap, coldly deeming the new maid she's never seen before as useless. With a sinister smile, she reassures the terrified maid, promising to take the time to fix her. Raising the strap, she issues a twisted command. The maid must now say, "Thank you," every time she is hit. The woman demands to know if she's understood, as the maid looks up in absolute terror, only able to stammer, "My lady." Rosalina looks up in shock as an unseen speaker announces that Brighton approves her divorce. Beaming with joy, Rosalina listens as all rights and privileges of the Brighton name are promised to be returned to her. The gray-haired man solemnly states, "And now, you can call me father." A memory surfaces of a younger Rosalina, blissfully happy and surrounded by flowers. Back in the present, Rosalina ponders her situation with a thoughtful expression. Rosalina realizes that to keep her 4 million gold, she ironically needs more money, as divorce is considered disgraceful for a woman. She knows that for a divorced woman from a powerful family, a swift remarriage is customary. This remarriage, however, would come with a hefty gift of gratitude to the new family. She concludes there is only one solution to her predicament. With fiery determination, she resolves to buy a title for her independence, realizing that ultimately she needs money. With her back turned, Rosalina stands resolute in the grand room, her path now clear. Suddenly, a system window materializes, announcing her newly awakened trait, a rank F summoner who calls items from unknown worlds. A powerful message echoes in her mind: change her fate and acquire wealth. She wonders in shock if she's been trapped in some kind of game-like world. A beautiful and thorny book cover marks the beginning of her story. The scene shifts to the entrance of a dark, dilapidated mine. The original story's protagonist, a smiling woman named Daisy, is introduced. Standing confidently in the darkness, Rosalina reveals this is the abandoned mine she received as a birthday gift. A thought bubble reveals a question about a certificate transferring the mine's ownership. Daisy looks at the ownership scroll in disbelief, questioning how she can accept such a huge gift. Leaning in close, Rosalina intensely urges her to take it while I'm being nice. The scene reveals the Lake of Purification, a stunning body of water said to hold fairy magic. Submerged in the glowing water, Daisy whispers in awe that it's so beautiful. Watching from the shore with a shadowed expression, Rosalina says she's glad Daisy likes it. With a sudden shove, Rosalina pushes Daisy deeper into the lake, exclaiming, "What a relief!" Daisy reaches out in terror as she plunges into the icy water. A large splash marks her disappearance beneath the surface. A malevolent smile spreads across Rosalina's face as she triumphantly thinks, "I did it." As Rosalina waits by the now frozen lake, the narration explains her cunning trap was designed to finish Daisy with hypothermia in the dizzying mine. But the plan fails. Daisy emerges from the lake, completely unharmed. She then discovers a hidden cave filled with sparkling magic stones. Just then, the male lead, Kaix, arrives to rescue her, and they share a tender moment confirming their feelings. Meanwhile, Kaix begins to notice Rosalina's suspicious behavior. Rosalina recalls the events of the original story she already knows. "I'll avoid the bad and take only the good," she resolves with confidence. She understands that her future now depends entirely on the choices she makes. The choice is weighed on a scale. Enter the lake and receive 10 billion, or stay put and get nothing. Rosalina stands at the edge of the shimmering lake, her decision made. With a powerful leap, she dives headfirst into the magical water. Mid-air, panic strikes as she wonders if the plan will even work for her, or if Daisy only succeeded because she was the heroine. The scene shifts to the imposing headquarters of the Dark Information Guild Hennes. Overwhelmed by a dark power, Argentian strains against invisible chains, his red eyes glowing with pain. A young attendant recognizes the symptoms with horror, identifying it as the vicious, hereditary madness of the Failsdon family. Huff! Later, looking utterly exhausted, Argentian covers his face and asks for the test results. His eyes shadowed with rage, he orders the aide to get out, who quickly agrees and flees the room. After his outburst, the man sits back in his ornate chair, his expression hardening as he composes himself. Clutching a familiar handkerchief, the man with red eyes wonders how on earth that woman managed to affect him. As he presses the handkerchief to his face, a brilliant light emanates from it, soothing his pain. His thoughts drift to his endless search for a cure, recalling how the continent's top physicians, mages, and shamans all failed to ease his agony. He remembers the curse that freezes his heart, engulfs him in flames, and tears his body apart with the weight of molten iron. He clenches his fist around the miraculous handkerchief, a look of disbelief on his face. With narrowed red eyes, he wonders what kind of trick Rosalina could have possibly used to achieve this. His thoughts drift to a memory of Rosalina in a garden, recalling her as a leech who exploited his family's name. In his memory, Rosalina flashes a conniving and confident smile. Overwhelmed, he grips his head in his hands as an off-screen aide urgently calls for his master. The aide bursts into the room, breathlessly announcing that the Duchess of Failsdon is in the parlor, stunning his master. In the parlor, Rosalina nervously twists her pink braid, the title Duchess Failsdon echoing in her mind. Drenched from the rain, she shivers while sitting on a sofa. With a beaming smile, she announces that she simply came to get her handkerchief back. Standing beside a vision of her former, more innocent self, she coyly adds that the details are a secret. Under the full moon, a caped Argentian asks if a report is complete, but his subordinate urgently calls his name. Staring at a reflection of a pink-haired woman, he angrily wonders how a woman he's never met could be engaged to him, impersonate the Duchess, and now be reported dead. He speaks the name Rosalina Brighton, as the official document in his hand bursts into magical flames. The scene shifts to a grand, white castle under a starry night sky. A hooded figure gently pats a horse, wearing a dark, intimidating mask. Inside the estate, servants rush about in a panic. Rosalina furiously declares that the current blue banner won't do, and orders it changed to black to be more fitting for a funeral. Her attendants hesitate, explaining there isn't enough time to secure black banners. Her eyes glow with menace as she coldly asks if they are saying they can't do it. Standing before the estate, she thinks to herself that she is, in fact, perfectly alive. From behind a curtain, Argentian watches her, realizing it was all a trap. He watches Rosalina's knowing smile, thinking that she's finally come for him. As she walks into a garden, she calls out his name, Argentian, and he wonders how she sensed his presence. He steps out from his hiding place among the white lilies, demanding an explanation for the ridiculous farce. Holding a lily, she explains that he needs to come back, but he doesn't understand her meaning. She moves closer, admitting she faked her death, hoping it would be enough to make him visit. Presenting the flower, she declares that her risky plan worked after all. She gently places the lily on his chest, reminding him that he's standing right in front of her. He lets the flower fall to the ground. Undeterred, she smiles and insists that she knew from their first meeting that they were destined for each other. In the flashback, she clings to him, promising he can stay with her comfortably instead of returning to the battlefield. He violently shoves her away, shouting for her to stop. Inwardly, he seethes, decrying her as a selfish and unpleasant woman. He considers how easily he could end her life, with a simple reach and grasp of his hand. Leaning close, he touches her cheek, gently noting that her insomnia has worsened, and she's in a dangerous state. He closes his eyes and reassures her that she will be all right as a gentle breeze blows through the night. Back in the present, Argentian jolts awake, startled, finding Rosalina sleeping peacefully beside him. He looks down at her sleeping form, realizing she got the better of him, and wondering what trick she used. He continues to stare, viewing her as a dangerous woman whose true identity he can't discern. A dark thought crosses his mind as he considers killing her right now, his hand reaching toward her. He stops himself just before his hand touches her hair. From a window, a woman watches as a cloaked figure walks away through a sunlit courtyard. In a dreamlike vision, a desperate Rosalina reaches out, asking her master if he is listening. The memory shifts to an emotional moment between a tearful Rosalina and the masked, hooded man. Back in the present, sitting across from Rosalina, the masked man recalls her request for the handkerchief. Elsewhere, a young aide gasps in utter shock. The path to the Dark Information Guild, Villainess, is revealed, guarded by a formidable white owl. The trail leads to an alley near a grand statue of the inviting emperor. The destination is a secluded antique shop, hidden away from prying eyes. Inside the shop, Rosalina begins to state her current situation to the masked man. Annoyed, the masked man internally remarks on her surprising arrogance. A frantic Rosalina accuses him of losing the handkerchief, insisting her plans were too important to be discarded. With tears in her eyes, she explains the handkerchief was a priceless treasure and the only gift she ever received from her husband. As she rails against his disrespect, the masked man interrupts, questioning if her husband truly gave it to her. He remembers the item was just an ordinary, unembroidered handkerchief. His red eye narrows with suspicion as he wonders why she would give away something she cherishes so much. Leaning forward, he pointedly asks her when she received this supposed gift. Rosalina counters sharply, reminding him that gathering information is the entire purpose of his guild, Villainess. She voices her disappointment in his service, while he silently concludes she must have ulterior motives. She mockingly suggests he abandon his title as the best in the empire, to which he coldly agrees if that's what she wants. Her taunt transforms him into a hissing black cat facing a snarling dog, and in a small panel, he thinks he doesn't want to enter as he's carried away. Back in reality, the masked man lets out an exasperated sigh. He formally offers to compensate her by accepting one of her requests at Villainess. Gesturing to an ornate chair, he asks for her thoughts, while she considers what information she might be able to find here. Relenting, he places a hand on her shoulder and agrees there's no other choice. Staring into her cup, she understands his terms. Take the money and title from the divorce, but give up on remarriage. She scoffs at the thought, wondering who would ever remarry just for someone else's benefit. A confident smile spreads across her face as she envisions her true goal, building her own wealth, buying a title, and living alone. She gives him a cute smile, pleased that he's quick to understand her true intentions without needing a lengthy explanation. She recalls recognizing his mask at the auction house, instantly identifying him as the notoriously trustworthy guildmaster of Villainess. She celebrates her successful gamble, but is struck by a sudden, surprising thought. Looking at him closely, she thinks he's quite handsome and is overcome with a strange feeling of déjà vu. She's snapped out of her reverie as he calls out, "Ma'am, are you listening?" Thump. He slams his hand down on the table to get her undivided attention. As the chair tips, he swiftly catches her, anxiously asking if she's heard anywhere. For a tense moment, they are frozen in a close embrace, staring into each other's eyes. The attendant Maurice looks on in confusion as the master suddenly backs away, creating a large distance between them. The master orders Maurice to bring all documents related to aliases and purchasable titles, shocking the attendant with the massive request. He turns back to Rosalina, pointedly asking how she intends to pay for his services. She looks perplexed as he reminds her that the fees for using the services of Villainess are not small. Dismissing his concern with a bright smile, she tells him he's worrying about unnecessary things. "Let's settle it right now," she declares, emptying a bag of brilliant, glowing blue gems onto the table. A close-up shows a hand gripping a piece of green fabric. The scene dissolves into a romanticized memory of Rosalina and the masked guildmaster among flowers. Later, dressed in a lavish gown and jewels, Rosalina gazes out a window, wondering why the guildmaster wears a mask. She speculates it might be a scar, but realizes she knows nothing about him, as he wasn't a character in the original novel she remembers. Her train of thought is broken by a sudden noise that makes her jump. Mortified, she mentally berates herself for her wandering thoughts and lack of focus. Surrounded by glittering coins, she laughs triumphantly, celebrating her new wealth and status. Composing herself at the table, she decides it's time to summarize her plan. A glowing blue system summoner window appears before her, a phenomenon she notes only she can see. A system card displays a cheerful, chibi version of Rosalina, identifying her as an F-rank summoner. She attempts to summon a silver bar, but a system message informs her that she cannot summon items above her level. She tries again, this time for a bronze bar, but the summoning circle fizzles out once more. Collapsed on the floor in exhaustion, she despairs over her repeated, painful failures and wonders what her level actually is. The scene shifts to the present, where she sighs wearily while holding a cup of tea. Taking a sip, she narrows her eyes, contemplating what small yet useful items she might be able to summon at her low level. Elsewhere, two noblewomen gossip, with one mockingly saying the scarecrow duchess ended up looking foolish after the divorce. Another suggests the divorce is just a story to hide the shame of being kicked out. The red-haired woman agrees, smugly stating that the position of duchess never suited her anyway. Overhearing them, Rosalina sips her tea, identifying one of the women in her thoughts as Lady Bronzena. The blonde woman, Lady Bronzena, smiles with a seemingly gentle and innocent expression. The other ladies gather around Bronzena, consoling her over the Villainess's interference and calling Bronzena a pitiful person. As she eats a pastry, Rosalina thinks that the wretched Villainess shouldn't dare to go beyond her place. The red-haired woman tearfully hugs Bronzena, apologizing for bringing up a painful subject. Bronzena comforts her, but thinks possessively to herself that the Duke was hers from the very beginning. She wonders why Rosalina, who can surely hear everything, isn't coming over to confront them. Another woman thinks that if they provoke Rosalina, she'll explode like a volcano and ruin her own reputation. In a flash of stylized violence, a pink-haired figure furiously grabs another woman by the hair. Bronzena thinks to herself that the foolish woman is easier to predict than a monkey. A man with dark hair thinks angrily about how she dared to set her sights on his prince and take his place. The red-haired woman gets Bronzena's attention, who feigns a look of slight surprise. Rosalina's eyes widen as she overhears them mention the title, Duchess Failsden. A title card appears, explaining the scene is from the perspective of the other young ladies. Whispers of the disaster of Brighton and the villainess of Failsden are cut short as a drink is slammed down. The red-haired woman stands her ground, claiming they said nothing untrue, and shamelessly asks Rosalina why she's there. As Rosalina sips her tea, the red-haired woman yells that getting divorced is nothing to be proud of. Bronzena wonders why Rosalina is silent, while her companion speculates that she's intimidated. The red-haired woman continues her tirade, citing rumors that Rosalina has been abandoned by her family and kicked out of the ducal household. Another lady snidely suggests she married the 60-year-old, recently widowed Count Bertner. Bronzena feigns sympathy, saying the Duchess probably didn't want things to turn out this way. An unspoken thought suggests she may have lacked proper guidance or a lady to learn from. Rosalina clutches her chest as a sharp pain strikes her, remembering the title, Disaster of Brighton, isn't for no reason. She looks down at her hand, wondering if the original Rosalina's heart and its feelings still remain within her. As Rosalina prepares to speak about the rumor, a blue-haired woman nervously glances over. The red-haired woman watches intently as Rosalina continues, referencing the story they've all heard. Rosalina coolly points out that they are all just gossiping for fun without bothering to verify the truth. Stating she's different, she decides to confirm the truth herself and pushes past the red-haired woman, ordering her to move. She directly confronts Bronzena, asking if it's true that she was the one who was supposed to be engaged to the Duke. Rosalina dismisses it as a rumor when Bronzena hesitates, prompting the flustered woman to stammer about an event 4 years ago. Panicked and tearful, Bronzena admits that an engagement was discussed during the Duke's visit, and he seemed receptive to it. With her back to them, Rosalina summarizes the situation. Bronzena maliciously spread a rumor and then hid, pretending to be innocent. She dismisses the crying Bronzena, stating she's malicious but lacks the weight or value to even be called a villain. Looking down at the humiliated woman, Rosalina wonders aloud if there was ever a noblewoman for her to look up to. She forcefully grabs Bronzena's chin, asking if that role model was simply of no significance. Trembling with rage, Bronzena's eyes blaze as she furiously demands to know who Rosalina thinks she is. She recoils in shock and anger, shouting, "How dare you!" A flash of the original Rosalina's cruel memories surges through her mind. Acting on a powerful, instinctual impulse from those memories, she slaps Bronzena across the face. Horrified by her own involuntary action, she thinks that this is going too far. Pointing an accusatory finger, she lectures the stunned Bronzena, telling her to live a good life and stop bullying others. The pale woman with white hair signals yes, while the red-haired woman and two other brown-haired maids look on with shocked expressions. A thump sounds as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks distraught and declares she messed up. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, triumphantly exclaims that she found a clue about summoning and now only needs to go home and test it. The masked dark-haired man confronts Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, asking if she has urgent business. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks shocked, questioning, "Master?" and wondering what brings him here. The masked dark-haired man holds a document, explaining the contract draft is finished for reporting, but muses why he bothered coming himself. A pull sounds as the masked dark-haired man notes a commotion in the cafe, and Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, thanks him for bringing the document. With a grab, Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holds onto the masked dark-haired man, telling him he needs to check what happened, and then demanding, "Escort me." Step sounds as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, walks through a bustling town square with the masked, dark-haired man, holding the document. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks annoyed as she reads the document, thinking she doesn't need intermediate reports, and finds the process tiresome. A grab sounds as the masked, dark-haired man gently places his hand on Rosalina's waist while she gives him a subtle side-eye as they walk. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, slyly asks the masked dark-haired man if he came all this way because he is in love with her. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, confidently reflects on her own wealth and beauty, while the masked dark-haired man internally notes he senses no magic from her. A thump sounds as the masked dark-haired man stands, observing Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, who remains turned away from him. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, turns to face the masked dark-haired man with a determined expression. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, smiles sweetly as she hands him the document, telling him to call me Rosalina. The masked dark-haired man looks surprised as he holds the document she has given him. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, mentions her impending divorce or status as Lady Brighton, which the masked dark-haired man flatly refuses, causing a bang sound of surprise. The masked dark-haired man states he doesn't bet on anything uncertain, looking serious amidst a scratchy sound effect. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, wonders why the masked dark-haired man became so serious and concludes that he truly does not like her. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, appears embarrassed by her own behavior, then resolves that they should treat each other as business partners from now on. Sizzling sounds accompany a close-up of delicious-looking chicken skewers, which are revealed to be this world's chicken skewers. Chew and tap sounds accompany Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, asking the masked dark-haired man how much the chicken skewer he is holding costs. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, asserts she's not borrowing and instructs the masked dark-haired man to put the cost on her tab, with a tap sound. A clink sounds as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, sips this world's juicy fruit juice and asks the masked dark-haired man if he'd like to look at that one too. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, and the masked dark-haired man observe this world's strange sculptures, looking at an abstract hand-like statue. A thump and an ugh sound as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, excitedly examines a table of colorful, unusual fruits while the masked, dark-haired man observes. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks surprised, questioning if the items are this world's strange fruit or vegetable, while the masked, dark-haired man watches. The masked, dark-haired man tells a vendor to give me one, paying with a coin that makes a clink, and the vendor profusely thanks him, while Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, observes. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, holding a piece of the strange fruit, excitedly asks the masked, dark-haired man if he is curious or going to eat it. With twinkling sounds, the masked, dark-haired man smiles subtly, confirming that he is of course not going to eat the strange fruit. Thump sounds as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looking utterly confused and flustered, loudly tells him to stop being so nice to me and wonders if he is handsome under his mask. With a growl, Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, with her hair resembling fire, sternly tells herself to stop daydreaming and work. A thought bubble reveals the objective: to summon something trivial, yet useful enough to be summoned even at my level. Silhouetted maids and open books accompany the thought that people in the Empire, regardless of status, are crazy about roses, with perfume bottles shown. Various elegant perfume bottles, adorned with rose motifs, are displayed amid scattered gold coins and glowing effects. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, with intense red eyes and swirling pink hair, attempts to summon a rose. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, continues her summoning with fierce determination, calling out, "Summon, Rose," as crackling sounds emanate from her hands. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, lies on her back, smiling happily, surrounded by magical light and colorful falling petals, indicating a successful summoning. A thud sounds as a single artificial pink rose with a green stem lies on a surface, and Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks at it, thinking, all. The beautiful artificial pink rose is highlighted, described as bringing joy to everyone. Rustle, and clink sounds fill the grand room as the gray-haired man writes diligently at his desk, while a bald older man serves him a drink. A close-up of the gray-haired man reveals a contemplative and slightly concerned expression. The bald older man states that it is quiet in the spacious, elegantly furnished hall. The bald older man hands documents to the gray-haired man, commenting on the peaceful atmosphere, to which the gray-haired man thoughtfully responds, A peeking sound is heard as Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, peeks from behind a door, looking surprised. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, steps into the room, stating she came to say something to the two men. The bald older man reacts with shock, questioning if she came to say something, while internally thinking she wants them to leave her alone. The gray-haired man looks surprised and questions, "Birthday?" after Rosalina off-screen mentions that father's birthday is coming up, isn't it? A fidget sound accompanies Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, who looks slightly anxious as she adjusts her dress. In a decorative box, a beautiful golden fountain pen is presented as a gift. A man with white hair and glasses inspects the pen thoughtfully, as an off-screen voice asks if it's pretty. He tests the pen, pressing its nib firmly against a sheet of paper. With a cheerful V sign, Rosalina reveals that it's not a real pen, just a solid lump of gold. She clasps her hands together, excitedly asking if he thinks it's a cool gift. Her bright, smiling face radiates with hopeful anticipation. The white-haired man stands alone in a grand library, looking down at the golden pen in his hand. He gazes at the gift with a troubled expression, wondering if he even deserves to receive a present from her. Overwhelmed with guilt, he covers his face, realizing he failed to be a parent she could rely on. He's suddenly snapped out of his thoughts by someone calling him Duke. Holding a large bouquet of roses, Rosalina faces a maid and thinks the situation feels strange. Confused, she wonders why there are suddenly so many things blocking her way in her own home. An aura of thorns surrounds her as she glares, frustrated by the obstacles in her path. Sighing, she explains her simple wish to decorate the room of her late mother, who loved flowers, with the best roses she could find. Two maids stand resolutely in her way, firmly stating there are no exceptions. The maid plots to prolong the standoff until His Grace, the Duke, arrives to witness the scene. Her plan is to frame Rosalina as a troublemaker, trying to enter Lady Beatrice's room, twisting her past actions. She further plots to accuse Rosalina of cruelly forcing a maid with a rose curse to handle the flowers. Convinced of her victory, the maid believes it's only a matter of time before the cruel Rosalina is thrown out. Rosalina interrupts the maid's thoughts, calmly asking if she is waiting for someone. Leaning in with a knowing smile, she pointedly asks if the maid is waiting for His Grace. Rosalina cheerfully suggests they wait together for him, leaving the maid to wonder why this feels so wrong. With a smug look, Rosalina internally congratulates herself for not having done anything wrong today. A furious voice bellows, Rosalina, startling her and making her wonder if she actually did do something wrong. Down the hall, her father, the Duke, rushes toward the scene with a grim and urgent expression. Panicked by her father's arrival, Rosalina pleads that it's not what it looks like and questions why this is happening again. A hand suddenly grabs her arm with force. Her beautiful bouquet of pink roses slips from her grasp and falls to the polished floor. Her father grabs her by the shoulders, his face filled with concern as he asks if she is all right. Stunned by his unexpected reaction, Rosalina can only manage a confused, yes, the scene transitions, showing a red, ornate book floating among scattered papers. A golden key appears, resting on the open book as the story turns a new page. A brown-haired woman stands forlornly amidst a frame of roses. Rosalina enthusiastically grabs the brown-haired woman's hand, exclaiming that she came. The woman explains she received the letter about Rosalina's poor health and came to clear up a misunderstanding, as Rosalina watches with a sly look. Rosalina leads her guests down a long hall, offering a grand tour of Brighton Castle. The woman, Beatrice, expresses concern for Lady Rosalina's health, but Rosalina cheerfully brushes it aside. A brief flashback shows a figure in brown pushing Beatrice into a lake, as Rosalina's thought reveals she accidentally did it. Looking out a window, Beatrice naively thinks that her current fortune is all thanks to Lady Rosalina. Rosalina accepts the thanks, adding that she's glad she prepared a gift, which confuses Beatrice. They enter a lavish bedroom, and Beatrice gasps in shock, wondering what this place is. With her back turned, Rosalina reveals to Beatrice that this was her mother's room. Beatrice is horrified, realizing she is in the forbidden room of the Brighton estate. Crash Rosalina suddenly shoves Beatrice, who cries out her name in utter shock. With a wicked smile, Rosalina challenges Beatrice, wondering if she can escape like a rat this time. "Kya!" Beatrice cries out as Rosalina violently pushes her forward. Beatrice stumbles back, her face a mask of pure terror. The heavy door slams shut and locks, trapping a terrified Beatrice inside, as Rosalina's dark silhouette looms. Rosalina, the pink-haired woman, looks distressed as she exclaims that Daisy has finally shown her true colors, while the gray-haired man stands behind her. A brilliant, divine light bursts forth from behind an ornate, slightly open door. Hesitantly, the long-haired woman Daisy holds a small, glowing object and wonders what it is. Daisy smiles serenely as a glowing emblem appears on her forehead, and the object in her hands shines intensely. The gray-haired man recoils in shock, identifying the object as the long-lost fairy's emblem, as Rosalina looks on in disbelief. Bathed in a radiant, ethereal light, Daisy looks on with a stunned expression. The fairy's emblem, a glowing golden egg with delicate wings, is revealed to be a must-have item. Rosalina's determined gaze reveals her goal. To get the emblem, she must enter Beatrice's room. From an overhead view, the gray-haired man scolds a young maid with reddish-brown hair, while Rosalina and other maids observe. The young maid Antonia is revealed to be suffering from the Curse of the Rose, a rare affliction in the Empire. A look of concern crosses Rosalina's face as she contemplates the Curse of the Rose, knowing a single touch could be fatal to Antonia. The deadly nature of the curse is illustrated by a hand surrounded by bloody roses and sharp thorns. An unseen speaker reveals that despite her deadly curse, Antonia is now demanding to enter Lady Beatrice's room. The headmaid gravely reports that while Antonia was caught today, she has likely been sneaking in repeatedly. She further reveals that some of Lady Beatrice's belongings have gone missing, and the culprit remains unknown. Rosalina sharply interjects, telling them all to wait. The gray-haired man sternly asks the head maid if she knows her foremost duty, to which she timidly replies, "Sir." Putting on his glasses, the gray-haired man declares with cold fury that her duty is his daughter's safety. The head maid trembles in fear as he states he will no longer hear excuses for her negligence. The man orders the head maid to the underground prison, as she and the other servants desperately plead for mercy. Rosalina watches the commotion, thinking to herself that this entire situation is meaningless. Kneeling beside a bouquet of roses, she thinks that her simple strategy would have easily solved this. She decides to focus on the present, picking up a single rose to address her father. Rosalina presents a single rose to her father, reassuring him there's no need to worry as he looks on, startled. He examines the unique flower, admitting he has never seen anything like it before. Cradling a large bouquet, a hopeful Rosalina asks if she could leave some flowers for Antonia. She carefully places the unique, summoned rose into the bouquet she's holding. With a serious expression, her father simply tells her to come with him. Rosalina beams with a bright, happy smile and eagerly says yes. She and her father stand together, looking up at a beautiful portrait of a pink-haired woman holding a baby. Rosalina holds the bouquet, a gentle and content smile on her face. As her father reads to her from a book, Rosalina struggles to stay awake, a single tear of exhaustion rolling down her cheek. With a click, she opens a shining, ornate box decorated with a rose motif. She holds the now open box, smiling with satisfaction as a soft light emanates from within. In a two-panel sequence, Rosalina yelps as the fairy emblem appears on her own forehead, then looks down at a glowing egg in her hand, utterly confused. The scene shifts to a dark, rainy evening in a European-style city. Rain patters against a stained glass window and pours onto the stone street below. Rosalina looks out pensively, anticipating another lecture from Antonia, who is seen complaining about her going out alone. Suddenly, the masked, dark-haired man appears before her, reaching for her as she stares up in shock. He recognizes her instantly, his thoughts racing as he identifies her as Lady Failston. Rosalina looks up at him with wide, surprised eyes, asking why her master is here. Her cheeks flush as she looks at the man, clearly flustered by his sudden appearance. The masked man points toward a carriage and offers to escort her to her destination. As he drapes his cloak over her shoulders to shield her from the rain, she looks at him, touched by the gesture. Looking down at her, he bluntly asks if she is currently seeing anyone. Rosalina happily accepts his cloak, promising to wash it and return it to him. He adjusts his mask, annoyed, and questions what a married woman is doing in this situation. With a cheerful laugh, Rosalina decides to tell him a secret anyway. Leaning out into the rain, she excitedly proclaims that she might become a free woman sooner than she expected. The masked man is stunned by her words, the idea of her freedom echoing in his mind. As a storm rages, a lone woman thinks to herself that divorce is not an option. Rosalina frantically asks about the deposit check, realizing she already spent it all at the auction house. She argues that a divorce is valid if both parties agree, but the red-eyed man scoffs, accusing her of lying to force the marriage in the first place. He threatens to sue for divorce over the missing check, hoping she'll understand the predicament he's put her in. Rosalina counters by offering to provide a notarized sworn statement promising not to contest the divorce. The man with red eyes silently considers her surprising offer. With a tear in her eye, Rosalina internally pleads for him to just let her get divorced. She fumes, calling him an annoying bastard, but a sudden chime snaps her back to reality. A system window appears, announcing the execution of a divorce failure penalty, leaving her to wonder what that means. The system clarifies that the penalty is fate enforcement, a term that confuses and alarms her. Resolved not to give up, she decides to earn the money and sets off to meet the guildmaster of Villainess. The masked man watches as Rosalina bursts in, declaring that she always does what she says she'll do. Getting right in his face, she pointedly asks if he understands, and he meekly agrees. In a grand office, the masked man formally asks Rosalina her purpose for visiting. With a smug smile, she prepares to state her obvious intentions. However, her stomach growls loudly, and she collapses onto the table, lamenting that she hasn't eaten all morning. Peeking over the table, she asks the master for a snack before they get serious, leaving him to think her behavior is unbelievable. Leaning in with a slight smirk, the masked man reminds her that his guild is in a hidden location. He moves closer, leaning over the table where she sits. Looking up at him, she rests her chin on her hand and hums thoughtfully. She dismisses his posturing, telling him to just bring her whatever he's got. A basket of fresh, hot bread appears, presented as a simple and satisfying meal. The serving suggestions expand to include honey or dipping the bread in a mushroom soup. Rosalina blissfully savors a piece of bread as the masked man watches her from across the table. Seeing the impressive spread of food, she expresses her surprise, admitting she expected to be served moldy bread. She happily stuffs her face, declaring the simple meal a true feast. Raising a mug, she reflects that her current highborn body knows nothing of picky eating. The masked man critically observes her table manners, questioning if she had an etiquette teacher in Brighton. She leans forward with a bright smile, cheerfully asking him if the food is delicious. Surrounded by flowers, she laughs with pure, unadulterated joy. The masked man crosses his arms, thinking he had expected her to leave in a huff over his rudeness. He recalls her past reputation for viciousness, remembering a story about her flipping a table in anger. A memory of a smirking Rosalina in her wedding dress surfaces as he reflects that this is the kind of woman he married. Staring intently, the masked man begins to wonder if he has fundamentally misunderstood her. After clearing her throat, Rosalina announces it's time to get down to business. She raises her mug for a toast, calling out, "Cheers," but the masked man looks on with a confused expression. With a wide grin and a confident gesture, she brings up the topic of business. She hands him her mug, and he cautiously takes a sip. She suddenly thrusts a single pink rose at him, causing him to recoil in shock. Cupping her face, she asks him if he isn't aware of the infamous curse of the rose. The masked man's eyes widen with sudden, sharp understanding. He inspects the flower and notes it's not a real rose, though it's an incredibly convincing fake, which she confirms. A perfect pink rose rests inside a gift box, surrounded by pearls. She explains her business plan. By limiting the supply of these premium fakes, their price will increase dramatically. Looking him in the eye, Rosalina formally proposes a business deal with his guild, Villainess. In a different time, a long-haired Rosalina in a nightgown stops on the stairs as a voice calls out, "Antonia." A maid complains that she doesn't want to do a task she already did yesterday, wondering who would be willing to do it anyway. The maids gossip that even the head maid Dorota was captured, and wonder if anyone who still hates Rosalina remains. The woman on the stairs sits down, lost in silent, somber thought. Realizing the danger, she concludes that she must lay low for a while because her body is too precious to risk. Rosalina is shocked as two maids walk away, and she fumes that they left without a sincere apology. A red haze fills her mind as she wonders how the maids could be so confident in their defiance. A sinister smile appears, and she realizes it's as if someone strong is backing them. Startled by a shout of miss, Rosalina turns as she's scolded for walking around in her nightgown, meekly agreeing. The reddish-brown-haired maid, Antonia, leads a sullen Rosalina by the hand. With a pensive look, Rosalina wonders who could be behind the maid's newfound courage. A bright montage shows a confident and beautiful Rosalina surrounded by blooming flowers. Back in the present, she sits at her vanity, lost in thought as Antonia watches from the background. A fist clenches with determination as an unseen speaker declares their excitement lasts every second. Rosalina throws her arms up, finding the situation refreshing and exciting, while Antonia simply agrees. Looking downcast, Rosalina confesses to Antonia that she's been having nightmares recently. Antonia sits beside her and gently asks what kind of dream it was. Rosalina looks off, trying to recall the details of the troubling nightmare. A dark silhouette of her screaming flashes in her memory. In the nightmare, she was yelling at someone, while a dark-haired man below shouted back. She remembers the overwhelming feeling that her heart was going to break from the pain. Lost in thought, she wonders what the man in her dream had called her. As Antonia begins to speak, Rosalina abruptly declares she needs to get outside, startling her maid. She rushes for the door, insisting she needs a change of pace, leaving a stunned Antonia behind. Antonia quickly follows, asking about an escort, but Rosalina waves her off, saying there's no need. Dressed in a hooded cloak, Rosalina winks playfully as she heads out. The scene shifts to a bright, sunny day in a bustling city street. From a balcony, Rosalina wonders aloud if someone is easier to find than a stray cat, catching the attention of the masked man below. As another young man looks on in surprise, the masked man says that's what he was about to say. He reaches his hand up toward her in a silent offer. Rosalina asks what he's doing at the market, and he coolly replies, "It's normal for someone starting a business." Clasping her hands, she sparkles with excitement and mentions my business. She quickly corrects herself to our business with a cheerful pose, while he remains unimpressed. Joining him, she says she wants to come along, and he explains he's researching the market and looking for a building to buy. Beaming, Rosalina tells him that's a great idea, as sitting at a desk can dull the senses. She asserts her confidence in their rose business, prompting him to ask if she's trying to imitate him. He yanks her hood over her face, and she lets out a surprised, "Kya!" She cries out, "Ah," as her face is covered. He pulls her close, lecturing her to keep her hood on and bring escorts, as she complains his nagging is getting worse. Defeated, she agrees to his terms as they walk together down a tree-lined path. Elsewhere, a vial of red liquid crashes to the floor. A furious purple-haired woman clutches her head, demanding to know what's going on. She seethes that her plans are failing, just as she was getting close, revealing Leodor has regained consciousness. Her anger grows as she remembers her assistant, Dorota, has been imprisoned. She glares menacingly, blaming her failures entirely on Rosalina. Determined, she decides she must increase the dosage of it. With a furious shout to "Get out!" she violently shoves a screaming maid away from her. She grabs another terrified maid by the hair. As the maid pleads for her life, the purple-haired woman screams that no one is useful to her. She throws the second maid to the ground. The first maid rushes to her fallen comrade as they both tremble on the floor. Peeking from a doorway, a dark-haired woman with glowing red eyes spots something and thinks, "Found it," smirking with a promise of, "Just you wait." She reaches for a row of vials and selects one. Holding the potion, she vows to finish someone off, her thoughts juxtaposed with Rosalina's determined expression. Back in her own room, Rosalina rubs her tired eyes and prepares herself, thinking, let's see. A sorrowful, brown-haired woman named Eliza Brighton is shown surrounded by dark thorns. After Duchess Beatrice's death, Eliza, a former maid, experienced a massive rise in social status, gaining the most from the tragedy. As the sole witness to the incident, she was instrumental in destroying Rosalina's reputation. The narration explains how no one would suspect her, as she appeared to devotedly care for the young master and even tried to befriend the troublesome daughter. Rosalina wonders if Eliza's kind demeanor has been an act all along, recalling a moment of her true cunning self. Resolving to move forward, Rosalina steels her determination, realizing her life now depends on every single choice she makes. A woman with reddish-brown hair dabs her eyes with a handkerchief, feigning sorrow. At a beautifully set garden tea party, empty chairs sit abandoned, as everyone has sent their regrets. The woman thinks bitterly about the effort she put into preparing the elaborate desserts, which now sit untouched. Rosalina cheerfully interrupts, presenting a beautiful bouquet of flowers as a gift. The scene briefly shifts to rustling green leaves, marking a quiet moment. As Eliza questions the gift, Rosalina laughs, promising to cherish the memory of the occasion. Holding her teacup, Rosalina pointedly asks Eliza if she remembers the fairy tree incident. Eliza gasps, grabbing Rosalina's hand in apparent shock. Rosalina comforts her, saying people can be cruel, and that Eliza was just an innocent child at the time. She tearfully insists that blaming an innocent girl won't bring Bia back to life. Softening her approach, Rosalina gently asks if she may call the woman Mother. As they hug, Eliza's face twists into a demonic, red-hued sneer as she agrees. While Rosalina feigns a full heart, Eliza's inner thoughts reveal a sinister view of her cute, innocent Rose. Her facade cracks as she abruptly looks up in surprise, asking about the Duke. A stern, white-haired man identified as the Duke angrily demands someone bring him the guest list. He vows to make everyone pay for ignoring Brighton. Just as a voice calls out, "Darling." At the tea party, Rosalina eyes her cup, noticing a strange smell and an unfamiliar color. The Duke explains it's medicinal tea that Eliza prepares for him whenever he feels weak. Rosalina laughs brightly, cheerfully declaring that she hates medicine. Later, alone in her room, Rosalina is certain the tea was poison and completely suspicious. She despairs, wondering how she can possibly defeat a villain as cunning as Eliza, who is depicted with a menacing snake. Smothering her face in her pillow, Rosalina screams in frustration, desperate for a breakthrough. She leans over a glowing orb on a cushion, urgently pleading for it to awaken. A blinding flash of light erupts from the orb, illuminating the entire room. As the light subsides, Rosalina looks down in shock at a glowing object in her hands. A voice calls out her name as a tiny glowing sprout emerges from the object. A small, winged girl with teal hair appears, described as being as white as a cloud. Rosalina recognizes her immediately, realizing she perfectly matches the description of the evil spirit from the original story. The narration recalls how this spirit gave Rosalina absurd advice, like poisoning Daisy, and led her into traps. A dark memory shows how following the fairy's words ultimately led Rosalina to the execution stand. The spirit's evil true form is revealed, cackling as she wishes a miserable death upon Rosalina. The tiny fairy flutters away into the dark forest. The little green-haired fairy now looks sweet and innocent, cheerfully hugging Rosalina's finger. Lying on her bed, Rosalina laments that she thought the fairy was her trump card, as the creature calls her name. Deciding she's too tired, Rosalina ignores the fairy and resolves to sleep now and think later. The next morning, Rosalina casually eats breakfast in bed, while the tiny fairy buzzes angrily, demanding to know if she's being ignored. Rosalina concludes that this creature is dangerous and understands nothing of schemes. Deciding to ignore the unpredictable element, Rosalina pretends the fairy doesn't exist, making it squeak in protest. With a new resolve, she walks through the halls, the small fairy trailing beside her. The tiny fairy hovers curiously near the Duke's shoulder as he sits across from Rosalina. Rosalina smiles and takes a sip of her tea, calmly telling the Duke to pay the floating light no mind. The Duke mentions he heard Rosalina is hosting the banquet, the camera focusing on a vase of red roses. With a serene smile, Rosalina internally compliments the impressive display. The Duke stares into his teacup with a sudden look of suspicion, questioning its contents. As Rosalina's father sips his tea, a tiny green-haired fairy looks on in horror. The fairy panics, telling Rose to stop him because the tea is a poison called akarosia, leaving Rosalina stunned. Rosalina stares at the teacup, her thoughts confirming that the tea is suspicious. While the fairy despairs that he's already finished a cup, Rosalina decides she can't yet trust the fairy's words. Feigning a smile, Rosalina tells him that she's been feeling weak lately. Her father is instantly alarmed by her confession, his expression filled with worry for her suffering. Outside a grand estate, he holds a container of tea leaves and demands to know where she got them. Ingredient analysis results. The masked man confirms their fears, identifying the substance as the poisonous herb Akarotia. A detailed explanation reveals Akarotia is an ancient plant that builds up poison, leading to death when mixed with alcohol. As Rosalina concludes this was expected, the little fairy beside her triumphantly exclaims, "I told you so." Turning to the masked man, Rosalina calmly asks if there is an antidote. The fairy shouts that there isn't one, but the masked man confidently contradicts her, leaving the fairy shocked. He explains that an antidote made from Etra will work, and Rosalina acknowledges the information. Rosalina offers a gift to her master, asking if his recent work has left him feeling weak. She explains the gift contains precious medicinal herbs that have just arrived from across the sea. The masked man, looking weary, holds his head and admits her gift is too much. Rosalina laughs brightly, insisting he shouldn't feel burdened as a maid struggles with a massive sack in the background. Rosalina realizes the fairy is an expert at mixing lies with help, while the fairy insists it can't be true. Glowing with desperate energy, the fairy pleads for belief, swearing that in her time, there was no antidote. Over a table of pastries and tea, the masked man prepares to say something important. He tells Rosalina that what he feels most is gratitude toward her. Beaming with a cheerful smile, Rosalina makes a simple request: one ticket for Memento Mori. A cloaked Rosalina accepts a ticket to Memento Mori, a cruel place whose name means remember death. The scene shifts to a blood-soaked arena, revealed to be a gladiator gambling den. Rosalina's gaze is sharp and confident as she thinks to herself that she already knows the outcome. Her thoughts turn to today's winner, a nameless slave gladiator of unknown origin. An announcer hypes the crowd as a massive, muscular, orc-like gladiator prepares for battle. With a crash, a fifth gladiator falls defeated, and the crowd roars. The announcer marvels at the monstrous giant's stamina, wondering who could possibly defeat him. A weary, shackled gladiator with dark blue hair is introduced as the one-strike Kali. The announcer presents a special gift from Memento Mori, holding up a glowing blue box. The gift is a legendary fragment of healing, and Rosalina's eyes widen at the sight of the radiant gem. The crowd murmurs in awe, questioning if it's the real artifact that can save those near death. The announcer incites the crowd to bet on which of the 9 remaining gladiators, including Kali, will defeat the giant. With the fragment of healing offered as the prize, a hand reaches forward to place a bet. A smiling man with light brown hair asks the cloaked Rosalina if she will place her bet. A new challenger is introduced, the massive, undefeated champion known as Bullcold. The man explains the gamble is to guess Bullcold's number as Rosalina accepts a betting slip. As the announcer declares the beginning of the match, the gladiator Kali stands ready with his sword. In a flash of movement, Kali leaps into the air, launching himself into the fight. The announcer bellows, "Kali versus the giant," as the smaller gladiator charges his massive opponent. The two warriors clash in a blur of motion and force. Rosalina and the audience watch in stunned silence, amazed by Kali's incredible speed. Kali gracefully dodges the giant's clumsy attack. The giant looks around in confusion, having lost sight of his nimble opponent. In a burst of speed, Kali reappears, his sword glowing as he closes in for the final strike. With a powerful slash, Kali lands a decisive, blindingly fast blow. As two onlookers gasp in disbelief, the announcer declares Kali has defeated the giant and claimed victory. A disheveled man with dark, wavy hair looks down with a grim expression, while below, a pink-haired woman in a dark cloak flinches in surprise. Pulling her hood tighter, she looks back nervously, wondering if he saw her. She quickly dismisses the thought with a forced, sweaty smile, convinced it's impossible. The narration reveals the man is Kaix Blake, the long-lost heir of the Blake family, who was raised as a slave gladiator before the original story's heroine saved him. The story's beginning, Memento Mori, is shown with Kaix standing alone in a fighting arena. The cloaked woman thinks that, regardless of the plot, she would have done anything to avoid coming to this place. She worries that a single misstep could ruin the destined meeting between the story's heroine and Kaix. Suddenly, the tiny, green-haired fairy appears, warning that shady people have been following them, much to the woman's annoyance. She realizes they're being tailed by filthy slave traders, likely the ones who handled the item she possesses, and questions if she's their target. 3 menacing men block her path, their leader sneering as he asks where she's going. A gloved hand reaches out, demanding she hand over the fragment of healing. The demand is repeated as the hand continues to reach for the cloaked woman in the alley. The 3 thugs laugh mockingly, asking if she really believes she could keep the fragment for herself. Their leader leans in with a sinister gaze, telling her to hand it over while he's still being nice. The cloaked woman thinks to herself that she knew this would happen, and they wouldn't let her go so easily. Facing them down, she says she doesn't know how much they were paid for their services. She holds up her hand and makes a counteroffer. She'll give them 3 times their pay if they just back off. Wahahaha. The leader bursts out laughing, amused by her bold proposition. He flashes a knife and rejects her offer, countering with 4 times the amount and claiming loyalty to his employer, as she sighs, thinking they at least have some morals. Realizing there's no time to think because one wrong move means it's over, she watches as the thug lunges with his knife. As she braces for the attack, the tiny, green-haired fairy appears on her shoulder. With a confident grin, she reveals a glowing blue crystal and asks if this is what they're after. She holds up the priceless, legendary item known for its ability to heal any illness. Her expression turns sinister as she asks them to imagine what will happen if they return to their employer empty-handed. As the men stare in horror, she suggests that the price of their failure might just be their lives. She smiles brightly, announcing that since she's feeling generous, she'll just... And with a powerful motion, she prepares to throw the priceless crystal away. She hurls the glowing gem into the distance, the force of her throw knocking the stunned thugs off their feet. Plonk. The crystal lands in the water by a pier as the fairy takes to the sky with brilliant glowing wings. The thugs stare in disbelief, wondering how she's so strong and questioning if she's a mercenary. Splash. Their leader frantically orders his men to find the crystal in the water, screaming that they have to get it back. While the thugs curse and desperately search the docks, the cloaked woman watches them from a safe distance. The tiny green-haired fairy dives gracefully into the water to retrieve the crystal. She bursts from the water's surface, looking utterly annoyed by the situation. She complains about having to do such a menial task, while the thugs below continue their useless search. The fairy flies away with the crystal, giggling to herself that Rose will finally notice her again. The glowing crystal floats through the sky, its path described as far too obvious. The fairy proudly presents the recovered crystal to her master, happily announcing, "Hee hee, Rose, I got it." Landing in Rosalina's outstretched hand, the fairy holds the crystal, now looking puzzled. A dark-haired man with red eyes appears nearby, panting and realizing in his rush he forgot his mask. Rosalina is shocked to see him, asking why he's there. He grabs her arm urgently, telling her they have to leave immediately, but she just asks what's going on. Damn it. A hand emerges from the water, having failed to find the prize. The leader of the thugs surfaces, enraged that he still can't find the crystal. He turns and spots the dark-haired man pulling Rosalina away. Leaping out of the water, the thug demands to know where they think they're going. He lunges through the air with his knife drawn, shouting, "Take this!" The dark-haired man yells for Rosalina to get down, shoving her to safety as he intercepts the blade. Elsewhere, a woman with magenta hair recalls a rumor she heard, that Rosalina stabbed her husband after he brought up divorce. She throws her head back and laughs, declaring it's the most amusing thing she's heard in a while. A magenta-haired woman suspiciously asks a nervous maid if what she's heard is true. She dismisses the thought, deciding it doesn't matter whether the rumor is true or not. Placing an envelope on a tray, she concludes that high society couldn't care less about the truth anyway. Elsewhere, a shirtless man with bandages wrapped around his torso announces that his task is done. A chibi-style doctor with a monocle advises him on how to prevent his wound from worsening. Dismissing the doctor's advice, the injured man coldly tells him he's no longer needed and orders him to leave. A pink-haired woman observes the man, thinking he's just acting tough despite being stabbed. She recalls a recent fight where he knocked out 2 men with his bare hands. His killing intent was so terrifying that everyone else ran away, confirming her suspicion that he's a war hero. Despite his impressive skills, she still finds herself wondering why he was there in the first place. The pink-haired woman tells the injured man that since he isn't badly hurt, he should also leave. He turns back with a sharp glare as she warns him about overstaying his welcome in the mansion. With a determined look, She thinks about the difficult position his presence puts her in. A chibi version of the pink-haired woman sighs in exhaustion. Ignoring his advance, she scolds him for not following the doctor's orders and insists he rest because he's a patient. As he sits on the bed, she tells him she feels responsible since he was injured while involved with her. His eyes narrow as he questions her sudden mention of responsibility. She places a hand on his chest, surprising him as she says she's starting to understand things. Holding a glass of water, she explains that she is trying her best to change. She offers him the drink, telling him that he needs to cooperate with her efforts. Taking her hand, he makes her promise that there will be no more rude behavior toward him. He takes the glass from her, coolly asking what he gets out of their new arrangement. Beaming with confidence amidst a backdrop of flowers, the pink-haired woman makes her pitch. Later, she watches a woman with light blue hair sleep, wondering how someone who is cursed can rest so peacefully. Looking closer at the sleeping woman, she senses that something is definitely off. A tiny, winking fairy appears on her shoulder, thanking her for her help. She consults a glowing orb, asking the fairy to assess the current situation. The fairy flies over the patient and gasps, realizing this is not a fairy's curse at all. She corrects herself, stating that it is, in fact, a fairy's blessing. The pink-haired woman points to an IV drip, asking the fairy what is in it. The fairy explains that the bag contains a dangerous poison designed to rot the victim's blood. This poison is revealed to cause a slow and painful death, as shown by a vision of a woman collapsing. Holding a glowing artifact, the pink-haired woman focuses her power, praying her antidote will work. A brilliant light shines from her hands as she administers the cure to the sleeping woman. The fairy watches with concern, declaring that the treatment is still not enough. Determined, the small fairy announces that she will help. In another room, the magenta-haired woman hides behind a fan, asking if it's true Rosalina has been visiting Leodor's room. She interrogates a group of maids, demanding to know the reason for the visits. A terrified red-haired maid falls to the floor, stammering that Rosalina just wanted to impress the Duke. She repeats her statement, trembling as she insists that was Rosalina's only motivation. In a flashback, Rosalina reassures a maid, named Antonia, that her safety will come first. Rosalina extends a reassuring hand to the worried maid. A glowing light symbolizes her promise that Antonia's safety is her top priority. Back in the past, Rosalina tells a tearful Antonia that she will share a secret about an upcoming ball. Antonia reveals the secret. Since the Brighton estate has no heir, Rosalina plans to use the ball to fix her bad reputation. The maid finishes her confession, stating Rosalina intends to use her improved reputation as a stepping stone to seize Brighton. The magenta-haired woman scoffs, believing Rosalina's motive is obvious and that she has no other hidden agenda. Her expression hardens with resolve, as she vows not to let Rosalina's plans succeed. Looking out a sunlit window, she decides they must move up their own plan to counter Rosalina. In a flashback from 5 years ago, a woman with magenta hair proudly declares she is the Duchess of Brighton. She greedily admires a collection of jewels, declaring that it all belongs to her. Gazing at a man's profile, she sweetly calls him darling. She places her hand over his, reminding him that they are now husband and wife. The white-haired man, her husband, recoils from her touch with a look of disdain. With his back turned to her, he offers a quiet, detached apology. He walks out of the room, leaving her standing alone in defeat. The woman reflects that she tried so many times, giving him chance after chance, but he threw every single one of them away, a memory showing her walking away in disappointment. The scene transitions to a bright, sunny day amidst lush greenery. A younger, pink-haired Rosalina stands behind her father, the Duke. From above, she calls out to her father in the garden. He turns to face her with a serious expression, stating he has something to tell her. Rosalina smiles cheerfully, saying she also has something to say, as well as a favor to ask. The scene returns to the present as the former Duchess vows that she will never let Rosalina have her way, her vengeful face contrasting with Rosalina's past innocent smile. The setting shifts to a lavish banquet hall bustling with elegantly dressed guests. A guest whispers to her friend, asking if it's true the Duchess of Failsden has returned. Another guest confirms the rumor, adding that the Duchess herself is hosting the banquet. Two women in fine gowns converse quietly in a gilded hallway. A portly man, with an elaborate mustache, boldly announces his plan to capture Duchess Failsden's heart. His companion scoffs, questioning how he'll handle her infamous temper that even led to her divorce. The mustached man daydreams of gold, convinced that marrying her will make him rich. He confidently boasts that He can easily tame the fierce woman and make her a gentle lamb. Raising his glass, he smugly continues his thought, sure of his success. A stream of red wine is poured into a glass. Pfft. The red liquid suddenly splashes directly into his face. Staggering back with wine dripping from his face, he furiously demands to know who dared to do that. Rosalina lowers her now empty wine glass with a perfectly calm expression, offering a faux apology. She claims her hand slipped, but the enraged man bellows at her to apologize. Rosalina's expression turns cold as she asks if he wants an apology, stating she's the one who deserves one, Baron Moliette. Baron Moliette trembles with rage, gritting his teeth as he sputters her name. Summoning the status window, Rosalina scoffs internally, wondering who would possibly want him. A voice explains how she's gathered destiny energy by acquiring the Wind's Tear and a Mana Stone. The voice continues, stating she has changed her fate from the original story, as Rosalina is shown holding the tiny fairy. With a confident smirk, Rosalina activates a glowing holographic interface. The blue, ethereal screen fully materializes before her. The screen displays the profile of Baron Johnson Moliette, Alina Brighton's older brother, whose only achievement was arranging his sister's marriage. Rosalina stares in shock, realizing the Baron is even older than her own father. She recoils in disgust at the thought of him wanting to marry her, realizing he's technically her uncle. With cold determination, she vows that no matter how low her reputation gets, he will never be her partner. The Baron offers his hand, promising to accept her as his, while Rosalina internally dismisses his words as nonsense. She physically pulls back, rejecting his unwelcome advance. As a guest speaks up for her, the Baron yells that she doesn't have a partner, so he's making a generous offer. Frustrated, Rosalina feels like she's talking to a wall and orders a guard to escort the Baron out. The Baron hurls insults, accusing her of having an inferiority complex and mocking her as an undesirable divorcee. As he's dragged away, he screams that she should be grateful he even made an offer. A man's voice interrupts, stating that she does have a partner, prompting the Baron to laugh and ask what idiot would partner with her. He trails off as he feels the entire room fall silent, suddenly aware of the strange and heavy atmosphere. The Baron looks up in confusion, a shadow falling over him as a dark-haired man with a piercing red eye appears behind him. A handsome, dark-haired man in a formal blue uniform makes a dramatic entrance as a guest screams in shock. The other guests whisper in confusion, questioning his sudden appearance and the truth behind the divorce rumors. Annoyed, Rosalina thinks to herself that she certainly didn't send him an invitation. A gloved hand suddenly comes to rest on her shoulder, startling her. She looks up in shock to find the dark-haired man standing directly behind her. Baron Moliette nervously backpedals, claiming his aggressive proposal was just a fashionable joke. Heck, with an icy glare, the dark-haired man asks if jokes now require risking one's life. Rosalina inwardly rolls her eyes, thinking what a cowardly bully he is. Suddenly, a large, shimmering blue system window materializes before the pair. The bright, hexagonal pattern of the window reflects in her wide, surprised eye. The man calmly addresses Baron Moliette, who can only stammer a fearful reply. With a sigh, Rosalina remarks that his apology has come a bit too late. Stepping forward, she coolly asks the Baron how his brewery business is faring these days. She continues her interrogation, asking if it's true he gambled away all his investment money. The Baron is stunned into silence, his face pale as he wonders how she could possibly know. The dark-haired man declares that as acting Duke, he sees no need for a trial since the Baron committed these crimes in Brighton territory. Rosalina raises her glass with a small, triumphant smile. He orders his men to search the Moliette estate's basement immediately, citing the captive children's testimonies as evidence. The surrounding nobles gasp and whisper amongst themselves in disbelief. Two noblewomen question the man's sudden claim, wondering what acting Duke means. No exclamation point. Baron Moliette furiously denies the accusations, shouting that it's a disgrace for a newcomer to pass judgment. He is cut short when another man's calm voice interjects, stating, "I gave her permission." The Duke of Brighton appears, explaining he granted power to a qualified individual. Rosalina silently notes it's only for today. As he pours a glass of champagne, the Duke challenges anyone who objects to his judgment to speak up. A tense silence falls over the entire hall as the intimidated nobles remain frozen in fear. Utterly defeated, Baron Moliette collapses to his knees on the ballroom floor. While the Duke sips his drink, Rosalina thinks of her own name, Rose, as if reminding herself of her purpose. Overcome with relief and victory, Rosalina lets out a bright, triumphant laugh. In a flashback, she is seen telling her father that something big is happening at the ball, which she must expose for their family's honor. Her father had replied that he couldn't turn away family, even if her change of heart was just an act, leaving her momentarily confused. The memory shows her diligently working at a desk, having started new businesses to restore their reputation. Recalling how she even found new tea for his health, the Duke muses that people really can change. The flashback ends with the Duke smiling warmly, telling his daughter, "Rose, I have faith in you." Back in the present, the Duke surveys the familiar faces of the nobles in the room. Turning his back to the crowd, he reflects that even the longest winter must come to an end. He turns to face them again, declaring with confidence that the snow eventually melts. He encourages everyone to help nurture the new sprouts that have begun to bloom as Rosalina listens intently. At his inspiring words, the crowd of nobles finally breaks into warm smiles and applause. Her curiosity piqued, Rosalina looks over her shoulder with a soft, She finds the dark-haired man standing silently behind her once more, his gaze fixed upon her. Elsewhere, Alina Brighton fumes, enraged that Rosalina humiliated her brother and had him thrown into a prison. She screams at her maids, furiously demanding to know why they just stood by and did nothing. One of the maids timidly explains that there was nothing they could have done. Alina violently slaps the maid, calling them all useless, worthless bugs who have never been helpful. She slumps into a chair, deciding she must restrain her anger for the time being. She thinks that as furious as she is, another matter takes precedence over her brother's fate. Glaring at the terrified maids, she screams at them to get out of her sight. The maid she struck falls to the floor, begging to see her little brother Riki just once. As the maid pleads just to hear his voice, Alina's hand closes ominously over a small, ornate box. Whack! A maid in a green dress is viciously slapped across the face. Kya! The maids scream as an unseen person raises their hand to strike again, wondering if they're being treated like a joke. A woman with two-toned reddish-purple hair glares furiously, demanding to know why her order to leave was ignored. In a flashback, a handsome dark-haired man in a blue uniform formally asks a lady for the honor of a dance. He extends a gloved hand to the pink-haired Rosalina, who stares back at him with a serious expression. Turning her back, she politely rejects his offer, stating she will be dancing with her father. He leans in close, challenging her by asking if her dance partner truly matters. Blushing with anger, she thinks to herself that his tactic to get his way is cheap. She concedes that it doesn't matter who she dances with, though she's surprised to see her soon-to-be ex-husband. Gah! She lets out a cry of shock as she is suddenly pulled forward. Now in his arms on the dance floor, she's startled as he mockingly asks if she has forgotten how to dance. Flustered, she glares up at him and vehemently denies his accusation. He swiftly pulls her into a spin, leading her across the ballroom floor. Dipping her low, he holds her in a graceful pose as they stare intently at each other. He asks if she's remembering the steps, but she coolly replies that she never forgot them. With a confident smile, he twirls her elegantly amidst a shower of rose petals. Her dance slows, and she hears someone call her name, Rosalina. The dark-haired man looks down at her intently, beginning to pose a hypothetical question. Leaning closer, he trails off while suggesting he wants to know more about her. He suddenly dips her again, this time so dramatically that she nearly falls backwards. She rights herself and sharply tells him to stop talking nonsense. He holds her firmly, asking what she truly wants and questioning if her goal is just to hasten their divorce. He warns that her actions could jeopardize the divorce, then leans in to menacingly ask if he should start obsessing over her again. His hand tightens around her waist as she struggles to form a response. She turns away from him with a look of wide-eyed shock. Elsewhere at the party, the two-toned hair woman and her companions cheerfully greet the arriving Duchess Brighton, who admits she's late. The woman, now identified as Duchess Brighton, smiles, pleased with herself. Rosalina, standing beside a white-haired man, proudly announces herself as the representative of House Brighton. Two women in the crowd gasp, whispering to each other in disbelief about the Failstons getting divorced. The gossiping continues as other guests speculate that the couple's earlier dance was just for show. A magical green glow emanates from the glass Rosalina holds. The white-haired man takes the glass from her, thanking his Rosa for coming back. Cheers. The two raise their glasses in a toast with another guest. As the man drinks, a dark thought declares that this is all the consequence of his own actions. Duchess Brighton thinks venomously that this could have been avoided if he'd become hers, calling both father and daughter fools as someone coughs violently. The white-haired man chokes, clutching his throat in sudden pain. His glass shatters on the floor as he collapses. Kia! He falls unconscious as Rosalina watches in horror from a distance. Duchess Brighton shoves through the crowd, then rushes to the fallen man's side, frantically trying to wake her. "Darling!" Overcome with grief, she lets out a desperate, tearful wail. She turns, her face contorted with rage as she screams Rosalina's name in accusation. Cradling the man's head, she demands to know if this is how Rosalina repays her faith and devotion. Through her tears, Duchess Brighton furiously demands an answer from the stunned Rosalina. A dark, horned silhouette looms as she internally wishes a plight on House Brighton. In a flashback narration, Duchess Brighton states she believed in Rosalina, even when everyone else criticized her. She recalls defending Rosalina's decision to expel the head maid, convinced there must have been a good reason. As demonic eyes watch Rosalina, the Duchess's voiceover asks how she could be so truly disgraceful. She remembers servants coming to her daily, pouring out their grief over Rosalina's vile behavior. Still, she scolded them, believing they were not serving their mistress properly. Her narration concludes as she looks upon the body, asking if this horrifying tragedy is the result of her actions. Alina Brighton angrily questions how someone could be so cruel, insisting that despite being overdue, the man truly tried to show his daughter affection. Overcome with rage against a blood-red background, Alina screams, questioning how anyone could possess such cruelty. Amidst nobles gossiping that she's a disgrace who should be erased from the registry, Rosalina sits calmly, unfazed by their contempt. The dark-haired man watches intently from the sidelines, holding a glass of champagne as he wonders what Rosalina's next move will be. As Rosalina contemplates her timing, the dark-haired man smirks to himself, glad he came to witness the unfolding drama. With a sly grin, Rosalina declares that if crime warrants removal from the noble registry, then her mother, who kidnapped and enslaved children, should be erased right along with her. Alina recoils in shock, sputtering that Rosalina's accusations are utter nonsense. The other nobles whisper amongst themselves, dismissing Rosalina's claims as a pathetic attempt to escape her situation. As a woman attempts to formally address Lady Failsden, another noble cuts her off, declaring that her title no longer matters. An elf-eared woman begs the crowd to stop tormenting the Duchess any further. Furious, Alina internally questions how Rosalina knew her secrets and resolves to replace every maid in the estate to plug the leak. Rosalina sweetly turns the tables, asking her mother where the physician is and questioning if she has already given up on her father's life. As Alina frantically calls for help, a physician announces his arrival, pushing through the stunned crowd. A sudden commotion fills the grand hall. A group of soldiers, led by a man with light green hair, makes a formal entrance. The green-haired man reports to the acting head of the house, confirming he has followed their orders. He announces that all the children imprisoned in the Mulliot Mansion's underground cellar have been rescued safely. The maid who Alina had previously struck rushes forward through the crowd. "Riki," she cries, falling to her knees to embrace her little brother in a tearful reunion. The boy Riki cries out for his sister, clinging to her tightly. The hall is filled with the emotional sounds of other maids and children being reunited. Horrified, Alina frantically insists that she has nothing to do with the rescued children. Eek! As the reunions continue, Alina lets out a small shriek, trying to distance herself from the crime. Rosalina turns her cold gaze back to her mother, declaring that this is far from over. She officially charges Alina with human trafficking, attempted poisoning, and the murder of the former Duchess. Feigning innocence, Alina clutches her head and claims she has no idea what Rosalina is talking about. Alina suddenly grabs Rosalina's shoulder from behind. She violently spins Rosalina around, forcing her to face a weeping maid. Through her tears, the maid confesses that the Duke was poisoned with a toxic herb called akarosia. Alina inwardly curses the maid as a worm, while the servant bravely states she will accept any punishment she deserves. An explanation reveals the insidious nature of akarosia. When consumed long-term, even a single drop of alcohol will cause the victim's heart to harden, resulting in death. The text further reveals that traces of the same poison, akarosia, were found in Lord Leodor's IV fluid. Alina yells in outrage, questioning how anyone could possibly believe such an accusation. She lunges toward the maid, dismissing her testimony as lies from a lowly wench. Just as she's about to strike, the Duke of Brighton's hand firmly grabs her wrist, stopping her cold. A note reveals the Duke had been forewarned about the Akarotia and had already prepared countermeasures against the poisoning. With Alina collapsed in shock before him, the Duke's reflection states that he had faith in both you and in myself. The sound of maniacal laughter fills the air, quickly followed by a series of racking coughs. Facing Rosalina and the Duke, Alina begins to break down. Lying defeated on the floor, Alina mockingly concedes to the charges of human trafficking and attempted poisoning, but demands proof for the murder of the former Duchess. With a crazed grin, Alina points a finger directly at Rosalina, hysterically accusing her of being the one who killed her own mother. Rosalina calmly replies that with so much time having passed, there's surely no evidence left. The scene shifts to a serene, long-haired man with white hair and striking green eyes. Narration describes a secret garden exclusive to the Brighton family, which holds a sacred fairy tree that has protected them for generations. A younger, curly white-haired man greets an arrival, holding a cake laden with fresh strawberries. Suddenly, a flock of crows takes flight in panic as a figure falls from above. A young man's body tumbles through the air, surrounded by a dark, ominous energy. A foot in a brown heel steps down, crushing the fallen strawberries into the grass. The curly, white-haired man runs in terror through the garden, desperately screaming a name, Beatrice! His face is a mask of pure horror as he calls out her name one last time. A woman with magenta hair rushes forward, carrying an unconscious blue-haired woman and shouting for the Duke, who looks on in shock. A flashback reveals that the moment Lady Rosalina broke a branch, the fairy tree began to rampage, causing the magenta-haired woman to panic. The narration explains that the Duchess tried to protect Lady Rosalina and was injured as a result. A young, pink-haired Rosalina rests on the lap of the fallen magenta-haired woman who is told to be at peace. In the aftermath, a dazed young Rosalina is shown as the narration explains she lost her memory of the event. The Brighton family was barred by the fairy tree's barrier, lending credibility to Eliza's story that it was all a fairy's curse. Framed in gold, the narration states that she successfully rose to the position of Duchess. The world came to know Eliza as a devoted mother who cared for the comatose Leodor, who was said to be cursed by a fairy. A white-haired man explains that his brother's recently recovered memories contradict Lady Eliza's version of events. He pauses, touching the pendant at his collar as he reflects on the terrible truth. He levels a damning accusation, stating that Eliza actually tried to murder him, his mother, and his younger sister Rosalina. In a flashback, Eliza patronizingly suggests the young man is confused, but he coldly insists his mind has never been clearer. He recounts the memory of Eliza dragging him and a young Rosalina toward the ominous fairy tree. A close-up on Eliza's face from the past reveals her sinister smirk as her plan falls into place. Threatening the life of the eldest son, she forced the mighty fairy tree to weaken its protective barrier. Eliza looms over the fallen Beatrice, who glares up defiantly while shielding the young boy beneath her. Startled by her victim's lack of fear, Eliza questions the defiant look in Beatrice's eyes. Thump! An unseen hand violently grabs Beatrice by the hair, chastising her for her defiance. Leaning in close, Eliza whispers a venomous promise that they are all going to die there together. Ugh! Beatrice cries out as she's brutally slammed onto the ground. As Beatrice questions the betrayal, Eliza drops all pretense, admitting she has always hated her and wanted to crush her. A memory of Beatrice's happy family fuels Eliza's jealous rage as she questions why her rival deserved such fortune. She seethes, accusing Beatrice of using their friendship to build up her own good girl image. Ha! Sick of living on scraps of charity, Eliza sadistically orders Beatrice to beg for her life like a worm. As Eliza activates a dark curse scroll, the injured Beatrice selflessly pleads for her to save Leo instead. Eliza chillingly confirms she will kill Beatrice first, then curse Leodor into an eternal sleep to serve as her personal puppet. As Eliza briefly considers what to do with young Rosalina, the curse scroll erupts, causing Beatrice to scream, "No!" Returning to the present, Leodor concludes that this is the full truth of what he remembers from that day. Eliza panics, vehemently denying his account and screaming that it's all a lie. He reveals her treachery didn't end there, accusing her of poisoning both him and their father, while framing Rosalina for the crimes. He turns to Rosalina with a gentle smile, apologizing for being a useless brother while she was forced to fight all alone. He takes her hand in a gesture of comfort and support. With tears in her eyes, Rosalina smiles and embraces her long-lost brother in a heartfelt reunion. From across the ballroom, the dark-haired man watches the family's confrontation with great interest. Fushalina suddenly brandishes a scroll marked with a dark, magical sigil. Wah! Screaming that she'll never forgive Rosalina, Alina vows to kill her and send her to join her mother. A bolt of red energy strikes the floor, manifesting a glowing, ethereal sword. The dark-haired man instantly moves to shield Rosalina and her brother, deciding it's his duty to protect his wife. He stands as a firm protector before them, leaving Rosalina momentarily surprised by his quick action. Hiya! As the magical sword stabs his shoulder, he wryly comments on the fact that he was just stabbed. Onlookers cry out for the knights to restrain the woman, and they immediately move to comply. Defeated on the floor, Eliza Morio hears the charges formally read: murder of the former Duchess and attempted murder of the Brighton family. With cold finality, Rosalina adds human trafficking to the list of crimes and sentences her to death. Alina gasps, her face a mask of pure horror and disbelief at the sentence. She collapses to the floor, letting out guttural screams of despair as her fate is sealed. A shimmering blue window appears before Rosalina, announcing the completion of her mission to rescue the Brighton family. She stares intently at the glowing system notification, momentarily speechless. The scene transitions to the beautiful, sun-drenched exterior of the grand Brighton estate. Click! A maid with braided auburn hair announces her arrival as she enters a room. Wah! The maid lets out a shriek of surprise as an enormous bouquet of red roses suddenly rushes toward her. Surrounded by a bloom of red roses, the pink-haired woman smiles, declaring that Antonia's timing is perfect. She hands an envelope to the maid with braided auburn hair, instructing her to send the artificial flowers to a specific address. Peeking from behind a door, the pink-haired woman offers a cheerful thanks before disappearing. A voice scolds the lady for walking around in her loungewear as a tiny chibi version of her scampers down the stairs. Lying dramatically on a sofa, the pink-haired woman wonders what she'll do if all she can summon are artificial roses. Holding a single red rose, she steels her resolve to work hard and raise her summoning rank. Admiring a bouquet she's created, she decides to make some money while she's at it. She then pauses thoughtfully, noting that someone has been sleeping a lot lately. A tiny, green-haired fairy with glowing wings is seen sleeping peacefully on a large pillow. As the fairy awakens and floats into the air, the pink-haired woman realizes she needs time to recover. The pink-haired woman apologizes for pushing herself too hard, but the tiny fairy chides her, saying if she's sorry, she shouldn't apologize. A voice announces an intrusion for Lady Rosalina, catching her attention as the tiny fairy sits on her shoulder. The maid with braided auburn hair enters, declaring that there's something shameless she must say, even if it's terribly late. She, her brother Riki, and the other maids kneel respectfully before Rosalina. With tears in her eyes, the maid thanks Rosalina, exclaiming that their family has been reunited and it feels like a dream. Holding Riki close, the maid adds that she can't imagine what would have happened to the children if it weren't for Lady Rosalina. She then announces their collective decision to resign, confessing their sorrow and taking responsibility for their actions. Holding their resignation letters, Rosalina listens as the maid continues, stating that even though they were coerced, they feel they must leave. The maid bravely states that they will gladly accept any punishment Rosalina deems fit. With a knowing smirk, Rosalina questions if they came to her because her father said he wouldn't hold them accountable. Leaning toward Riki, she asks why they're talking about quitting when they have more mouths to feed now. The maids are moved to tears, whispering, "Lady Rosalina," in awe of her kindness. The young boy, Riki, beams and thanks her profusely, while his sister calls out to him for his informal thanks. Rosalina looks on, slightly taken aback by the boy's enthusiastic gratitude. A memory flashes, introducing a battered and bloodied blue-haired man named Kaix, the slave gladiator of Memento Mori. In a dark memory, Rosalina's inner thoughts reveal that she knew Kaix was suffering but chose to look away. She recalls telling herself to just wait, believing the story's heroine would eventually come and save him. A vision shows a beautiful blonde heroine leading the dark-haired gladiator by the hand through a field of flowers. Rosalina reflects on her life inside a book, where she was just a worthless villain, observing from the sidelines. She remembers how she bound herself in the chains of the original story, acting only to protect herself from a thorny fate. She comes to a new realization, This is not just a story, but another world where real people laugh, cry, and live. The scene returns to a bright, happy moment as Riki playfully dances with Rosalina and his sister. The mood shatters as a flashback shows the blue-haired Kaix being brutally whipped, and a voice screams, "You bastard!" An orange-haired man furiously demands to know how Kaix dares to escape, ranting about the money he spent on him. He looms over the bloodied Kaix, accusing him of being spoiled and thinking he's a king. Kaix desperately pleads, "Wah! Wait!" as he lunges forward, but it's no use. He's violently thrown back into a cell with a spiked gate as his captor watches with contempt. Snap! As the orange-haired man raises his whip to strike again, demanding the insolent brat recognize his master, the whip is suddenly caught. A pair of gray boots steps firmly into the scene. Surprised, the orange-haired man turns and asks the visitor if they want to see Gladiator Kaix up close. The visitor is revealed to be a mysterious figure in a dark cloak and a white dog mask. The man grumbles about kids these days, warning the masked figure not to mess around before stomping off. He greedily accepts a heavy pouch of coins. The man warns that Kaix is on the lowest level and is the most difficult prisoner to handle. The scene pans past a cell containing only skeletons and chains, setting a grim tone. The masked figure, revealed to be Rosalina in disguise, pauses her descent into the dark dungeon. She continues down the stone steps, stopping before a specific cell. She notices that this is the only spot where fresh bloodstains remain on the floor. Rosalina crouches low, peering through the iron bars of the prisoner's cell. From the darkness within, a pair of brilliant blue eyes glare back as the shackled feet of Kaix become visible. A pink-haired woman in a dark cloak offers a white mask to a disheveled, dark-haired man in a cage, questioning him. In his cell, the chained man clenches his fists, straining against his bonds. His chained hand glows with a red aura of intense power or rage. Kia! His hand darts through the bars, violently grabbing the pink-haired woman and pulling her forward. Stumbling, she looks up with wide, concerned eyes and thinks, "Oh no." Behind the bars, the man's eyes glow a menacing blue as he internally wonders if she's soaked in a beautification potion. Lying on the floor, the pink-haired woman smirks with a soft laugh, realizing this won't be easy. The scene shifts to a rainy evening in the past, outside a dark brick building. A person's bare feet step onto a wet, sandy surface. A flashback reveals a brown-haired girl's tragic past. Her parents died, and debt collectors stormed their funeral. The narration continues, stating that it always rained on her worst days, like when she had to pay debts with her tuition money. Her thoughts drift into despair, feeling constantly dragged down by things beyond her control. She reflects on her meaningless life, feeling she was just barely existing. Frustrated, she tells herself to get a grip because being upset changes nothing, then is seen searching for something in the rain. Shivering indoors, she tries not to think about her troubles while sitting beside a basin of water. She collapses to the floor, her hunger overwhelming her. Returning to the present, the pink-haired woman sits with renewed purpose, declaring that things are different now. With determination burning in her eyes, she vows not to be swayed by the original story anymore. She recalls a grim detail from the original story. Kaix's body breaks, trapping him here forever. Her eyes fall on his tattered clothes, noting the many wounds covering his body. She assesses the situation. The beastification potion has erased his rationality, making him too dangerous to approach. With a sigh, she resigns herself, thinking that it simply can't be helped. A small, smiling fairy with teal hair and delicate wings materializes before her. The fairy offers her a gift. The gift is a single, beautiful pink rose, which the fairy presents to her. She accepts the rose and makes her wish, asking it to please heal Kaix. A burst of magical light envelops the chained Kaix in his cell. He clutches his chest as the healing energy surges through him. Staring at his hands, he watches as the light cleanses him. His eyes transform, the feral purple hue giving way to a clear, calm blue. Rosalina approaches the cell and gently asks him how he's feeling. She smiles warmly, introducing herself as Rosalina, but telling him he can call her Rosa. Kaix looks up, quietly repeating the name she gave him. Rosa? The heavy manacles that once bound him now hang empty from the stone wall. He sits alone, recalling the ghostly images of past visitors who stared at him through the bars. Looking down with a somber expression, he thinks of his own name, Kaix. A man stirs his tea, angrily asking if Rosalina has gone to Memento Mori again. An attendant confirms her frequent visits, causing the seated man to demand why he is only now being informed. The attendant bows low, offering a profuse apology and blaming his own mistake. Whoosh. The angry man vanishes, leaving his ornate chair empty. Back in the cell, Rosalina offers Kaix a, quote, beastification antidote potion, urging him to drink it. As she tries to give him the potion, he eyes it with suspicion while holding a sandwich. He violently slaps the sandwich away and grabs her wrist, stopping her. A chibi Rosalina apologizes for the bitter taste as Kaix coughs and sputters on the floor. He glares at her resentfully as she explains he must drink it because the beastification isn't fully cured. As a reward, she offers him a small strawberry candy through the cell bars. As he looks up, she inwardly notes the change in his eye color and wonders when it happened. Her interest piqued, Rosalina leans forward and asks if she can take a closer look. Instead of letting her look, he grabs her hand and pulls it to his face with a sly grin. Holding her hand to his cheek, he smiles and invites her to look. With a sharp turn, Rosalina moves away. A masked man holds a sword to her neck, ordering the monster to step back while Kaix is chained in the foreground. A cheerful holiday illustration depicts chibi versions of Rosalina and Kaix exchanging Christmas gifts. Held from behind by an unseen man, a startled Rosalina asks her, "Master," how he got there. A hand reaches out as Rosalina warns them to stay back, insisting the chained man is dangerous. Straining on the floor, the chained Kaix cries out, "Rose!" He pulls violently against his restraints with a loud clank. With a furious roar, he lunges forward, testing the limits of his chains. The chains glow with crackling energy and then shatter completely. The masked man draws his sword, his eyes glowing red, as he threatens to kill whoever is so eager to die. Rosalina throws herself between the man and Kaix, shouting, "Stop!" The masked man grabs her, angrily demanding to know why she showed up so suddenly. Looking through the bars, Rosalina scolds Kaix for his injured ankle and tells him to take better care of himself. She sighs, thinking that it can't be helped since he doesn't understand anything yet. The masked man tells Rosalina that she's arrived just in time for them to talk. Reaching through the bars, Rosalina pleads that his words are too harsh for Kaix. The masked man stares past her, wondering if the prisoner is actually Prince Blake. Rosalina turns back in shock, asking him how he could possibly know. The masked man sighs, questioning whether her actions were a calculated attempt to win the prince's favor or an act of pure kindness. A dark snake coils around a sword as a voiceover mentions the goal of freeing all the slave gladiators. Grabbing his collar, Rosalina demands to know if he plans to take down Memento Mori. With fiery determination, she declares that the fall of Memento Mori is one of her ultimate goals. She admits her powerlessness and need for support, explaining that helping Kaix is her way of atoning for her guilt. In a dark memory, she laments that Kaix has suffered all this time because she couldn't reach him sooner. Facing the masked man, she states that although it's late, she's determined to make things right. She shyly asks if he, as her business partner, would be willing to help her free of charge. The masked man covers his face with his hand, looking utterly exasperated by her request. Rosalina excitedly kneels beside Kaix, asking the masked man if they have a plan. Unfurling a document, she explains her initial plan to use the guard's schedule to escape. With a confident smile, she rolls up the map and declares that she has a better idea and they won't need that plan anymore. Inside a guardhouse, one guard complains about his lazy colleagues, just as another arrives, carrying a large sack. The lazy guard dozes off at the table, leaning his head on his arm. Wham! The guard with the sack is knocked unconscious, shocking his sleepy companion awake. A masked Rosalina, flanked by her allies, warns the terrified guard to stay quiet, and they'll spare his life. She reveals a secret passage, while the captured guard panics, wondering how he's supposed to hold them back. Declaring it might be dangerous, Rosalina sends Kaix down first, calling out, "Master!" as he leaps into the darkness. Looking down into the passage, Rosalina breathes a sigh of relief that he landed safely, but Kaix just scoffs from below. Now wearing a cute dog mask, Rosalina suddenly remembers something important. She leans over their bound captive and demands he give her money back. Wearing her dog mask, Rosalina carefully climbs a wooden ladder. As she lands, Kaix catches her, blushing as he quietly thanks her. She forcefully pushes his foot down, ordering him to put his shoes back on. As the masked man walks away, Rosalina stops him, insisting they must go to Hennis first. He questions her plan, noting the distance to the Duke's residence, but is distracted by Kaix's clear, vivid eyes. His eyes widen in shock as he realizes those distinctive eyes are a trait of the royal family. He silently expresses his disbelief, recalling that the Empress only ever had one crown prince. He considers that the Blake family's eyes sometimes resemble the royals, but ultimately dismisses the possibility as nearly zero. He asks if Hennis has a medicine to change eye color, just as a chibi Rosalina snaps her fingers with an idea. The masked man holds out a small vial of golden liquid, entrusting it to someone. He gives the vial to Rosalina, instructing her to give it to Kaix daily because the beast within hasn't been fully resolved. The masked man looks stressed, questioning why he's the one who has to do this. A white-haired man remembers a happy family moment and thinks, right, with a sense of resignation. Rosalina cheerfully tells the masked man that once things are settled, they'll head to Duke Blake's residence. Kaix suddenly asks if he can stay with Rose. His unexpected request leaves both Rosalina and the masked man speechless and shocked. They continue to stare, stunned by his desire to stay with her. Overwhelmed, the masked man collapses to his knees in the middle of the cobblestone street. The trio walks across a sunny town square toward a waiting horse-drawn carriage. The masked man holds Rosalina's hand, helping her step up into the red carriage. Wah! Kaix peeks nervously from behind a doorway, watching them. In a flash, Kaix lunges forward and grabs the masked man from behind. The masked man pats a confused, chibi Kaix on the head, apologizing that he can't escort him the whole way. Rosalina looks back at the two of them, and Kaix calls out for Rose. Leaning out of the carriage window, Rosalina apologizes to a distraught Kaix, saying her dad and brother are home. As she drives away, promising to visit soon, a dejected Kaix quietly calls her name. Kaix's expression hardens, coldly telling her to stop with the pity act. With a defiant glare, he announces his full name, Kaix Blake. The scene transitions to the grand exterior of a large stone estate. A dark-haired man with glasses, identified as Maurice, the master's right-hand man, is surprised to see someone has arrived. Standing in a library, Maurice calls out to Miss Rosalina, who is now in an elegant blue gown. He holds out a book, explaining he was just bringing the one she had requested. Rosalina accepts the book, a record of past royalty and nobility, and thanks him. She thinks to herself that something has been bothering her lately. Kaix's eye color. She wonders if his eye color was ever described in the original story or if she missed it. Crash. Suddenly, Kaix face plants onto a desk in the library, shouting for Rose. Rosalina rushes to his side, grabbing his hand in concern. He looks up with a huge grin, excitedly telling her he found a baby bird in a tree. Rosalina stares back, looking completely exasperated by his antics. Kaix gets on all fours, cheerfully offering to give her a piggyback ride. The masked man appears behind him, quietly reminding him that before he goes off playing, they must finish his lessons on culture and etiquette, questioning if he thinks entering high society is so easy. The masked man calls him pathetic while balancing a stack of books, as a tiny Rosalina pleads for him to go easy. Rosalina asks the masked man if he requested an audience with the Blake family, and he confirms that he has for now. A man with white hair speaks by a fireplace, mentioning a rumor that's been circulating. The rumor is that the Blake family is on edge due to repeated appearances of imposters claiming to be their son. Kaix sits at his desk with a quill in his mouth, looking completely uninterested in his studies. Sigh. As the masked man suggests Kaix take a break, Kaix slams his face into the desk, wailing that he hates studying. The masked man thinks Kaix is hopeless, which immediately sparks Kaix's competitive spirit, making him determined to study. With newfound resolve, Kaix thinks that he now has a reason to study and won't give up. Rosalina looks up from her book and asks if his reason is related to finding his long-lost family. Kaix resolves to study hard and become worthy of Rose, whom he still thinks of as his new wife. The masked man stands over Rosalina's shoulder as she reads from the book. He asks her what she thinks, making her look up with a flustered expression. Snap! An enraged Kaix appears, shouting that they are too close and calling out Rosalina's name. Smiling sweetly, Rosalina distracts him by inviting him to see a newborn foal in the stables. Forgetting his anger, Kaix's face lights up as he enthusiastically shouts, I do. Rosalina and Kaix stand by a fence, watching a young foal in its enclosure. She gently holds Kaix back, laughing as she warns him not to get too close and scare the animal. The masked man approaches from behind, informing Rosalina that the item to change eye color has arrived and asking for her decision. The historical record states the House of Blake never married into the imperial family, and once struggled with inbreeding to preserve their line. The narration states that the Emperor and Empress are famously in love, with the Crown Prince being their only child. Recalling this, Rosalina glances at the dark-haired man beside her and wonders why he possesses the pure, vivid blue eyes said to be exclusive to royalty. Looking at a smiling Kaix, she thinks this is the first time she's ever doubted the original story and questions his true identity. A splash ripples through clear water, disturbing the calm surface.